Call to order this College Township regular meeting of Thursday, May 18th. Just as a note, Chair Stilson's not able to be here tonight, so I'm standing in. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first item of business is public open discussion. So at this point, we would invite any members of the public to come up and speak on something that is not in the agenda. If you could just wait if you want to speak to something in the agenda, we'll come to it at that point in time. So are there any members of the public online or in person wanting to speak on anything not currently in the agenda? Okay, I see none. Council, does anyone want to add any new agenda items?
No.
Hearing none. All right. Special presentations, SP1, College Township 2022 audit presentation. Please proceed.
Thank you and good evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joe Fideli. I'm a CPA and a principal in the firm of Fiore, Fideli, Snyder & Carruthers. And we were engaged to conduct the audit of the financial statements for the township for 2022. I believe you've been provided with a copy of the report. And it's my pleasure tonight to give you a brief overview and summary of the financial statements. It's quite voluminous. It runs 50-some pages or so. So I'll just kind of hit the high spots. I know you have a heavy agenda. But the bottom line of everything is that it is our opinion that the financial statements as presented are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with United States generally accepted accounting principles. So that would be considered a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion, if you will. It really doesn't get much better than that. We don't say, we're not allowed to say super glowing things, but we can issue an opinion. It's not a guarantee of fact. It's not an absolute assurance that there aren't errors or fraud or those kinds of things. We conduct our audit procedures to try to detect those, correct any errors that we come across, make adjustments where necessary, and try to be sure that we encompass all the assets and the accounts and the activities of the organization, which is of course the township. It encompasses all the general funds, special revenue funds. We perform procedures on the tax accounts, the receipts and disbursements to get collected and paid out. We look at things like the classification of assets, the categorizing of various expenses and those kinds of things, and that culminates in the financial statements. Our real purpose, if you will, is the first 3 pages after the table of contents, which is our opinion. And it goes through our responsibilities, management's responsibilities, what we can and cannot detect, what we expect to do and not to do. And then it does express our opinion again that they are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in the United States. I got to say that. They make me. So the report itself, after the opinion, is first preceded by management's discussion and analysis, which is authored by Mr. Long, and that is what the Government Accounting Standards Board considers to be required supplementary information. We do issue reports on other governments that really the MD&A and the financial statements just are regurgitations of one another, and you can read the financial statements. You don't need the MD&A. But in an organization the size of the township, it is helpful to have that narrative in the beginning, and really the first page of that captures some of the real highlights, extraordinary revenues, some money that came in as a result of the COVID, making up for lost revenues, those types of things. A couple of big capital grants or grants for capital, one of which really wasn't capital to the township, it just kind of passed through. Once we get past the MD&A, the next section are the financial statements are really more akin to the way a regular corporation, if you will, would present their financial statements. So into these presentations, we include the infrastructure assets as well as the cash and the long-term debt to bring you down to a net position. The assets minus the liabilities is a net position. And then the categories in that position include invested in capital assets and other related debt, restricted. Some of the funds are restricted for special purposes, such as you levy taxes for library, you levy taxes for capital project, you levy taxes for debt service, and those types of things. Since they're levied under a specific provision of state law, then they're required to be utilized for those purposes. And then you have your general funds, of course. The statement of activities likewise brings in all the revenues and expenses, and it does include a charge for depreciation to account for the obsolescence over time of your capital assets. Infrastructure doesn't last forever; it has to be repaired, it has to be replaced, it has to be enhanced from time to time. And then the next section are the fund financial statements, and those really capture the essence of how the township operates, how it budgets, how it expends its funds. You have the general fund, and again, like I said, a special revenue fund. You have some of what we consider to be major funds, and then other funds. So debt service and capital projects funds will be considered other major funds alongside the general fund. And then the other governmental funds are kind of consolidated into one column for that presentation. And by and large, this is revenues, expenses, pretty much cash basis, or what we call modified cash basis. So it would include any receivables that were expected to be collected in the next 30 or 60 days after the end of the year, and we would accrue likewise any expenses that were going to be paid right at the end of the year. There's a reconciliation of those fund balances to the statement of activities and statement of net position. And that's followed by a section called notes to the financial statements. First, it starts out with a summary of who you are, where you are, what you do. And then it describes the various accounting policies and practices as to how you recognize revenue, how you assign or allocate items of fund balance to various categories or restrictions. And then the rest of the notes are really details of those items on the balance sheet or the income statement that warrant additional information. For example, cash, where your deposits are, how they're secured. In Pennsylvania, cash balances at a bank that are not covered by FDI insurance are required to be secured under Pennsylvania Act 72, which requires the bank to pledge assets in usually a Federal Reserve Bank or Federal Home Loan Bank, segregated and earmarked to cover the deposits that they hold for all the municipalities collectively. So they put $100 million in the Federal Reserve Bank, and as long as their deposits from this township and other governments don't exceed that, then likewise your funds in Pliget would be considered collateralized because they have a special trust and they hold those types of assets. Other things that you'll find in there is a detail of your capital assets, your depreciation expense, your depreciation policies, describes and shows the excuse me, the long-term debt, the future maturities of the long-term debt, the interest rates, what's expected to be paid in debt service over the next, each next 5 years, and then in groups of 5 years after that. It also discusses some of the more related activities or related organizations, Center Region Park and Rec, and those types of things that the township funds on an ongoing basis, and other types of miscellaneous disclosures. At the end, there's some more additional schedules and accumulation of funds, special revenue funds, and other accounts that are summarized in fund financial statements. Be happy to answer any questions or go into more detail if you'd like.
Okay, thank you, sir. Staff, anything to add?
Bob, anything that you'd like to add?
No, I don't.
Council's responsibility would be just to accept the report at that time. Then, after we get the report, then we'll publish in the CDT a condensed version of the report. Then also make it available, the full report, online for everybody to see. So there's good transparency there. So, but I really appreciate Joe's firm and their professionalism and just how good a job they do for us, and the confidence we have in them, that they're looking over our shoulders like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, council. We'll go to council. Questions, we'll start with Rich.
No questions. I'm just very appreciative that we're fortunate to have Adams and staff, primarily in this arena, led by Bob Long, but always have Mr. Finelli looking over the shoulder, as was said. But there was nothing that drew any attention to me. Thank you.
Eric?
No, what drew my attention is it's a clean audit.
Yeah,
That's the bottom line.
that's the bottom line.
And
Yep.
anything in the last 4 pages was all good news, so
Yep.
kudos to everyone involved, and thanks for making the trip up again today to present it in person.
Appreciate it, and we appreciate the business, we appreciate the cooperation of, the staff and management as well. I've been in situations where it's considered, some sort of an adversarial, boxing match type of a thing where we gotta find one, or you gotta find one, and we gotta go back and forth on what's right or what's allowable, what's not allowable, and we don't really have any of those issues here at the township whatsoever.
I've been through that dance with the state and the Fed audit, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Good. Susan?
No questions. I was impressed by how collaborative the process was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just resound what all my fellow council members said. So does this require us then to take action?
A move to accept
Yeah.
and authorize staff to release the appropriate, so moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate coming up first, and appreciate not having to listen to the CNET presentation again. I'm usually on that agenda.
That's true, you missed that. That was the last meeting.
And I'm really no smarter with a tie. Thank you all.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, moving on to plans. We have one plan, P1, the Summit Park Sketch Plan. Mr. Franson.
Yes, we have here Bob Myers today, who will go over some of the specifics on the plan. That plan was presented
Thanks, Bob.
as a sketch plan to Planning Commission on May 2nd. Planning Commission was overall very much in favor of the plan, the way it was presented. A couple items did come up, and we'll probably go over these a little more detail when Bob does his report here. But one of the things they're asking for is they are going to be providing sidewalks on all the new roads within the subdivision, and they were looking at actually not doing a sidewalk in front of a particular lot until that lot is developed. And we do have a precedent for that in residential subdivisions. Like when a residential subdivision comes in, sidewalks are not done until each house is built. And the reason for that is if you put the sidewalk in ahead of time, it's going to get broken up as part of the construction. So overall, staff is in favor of that idea, and Planning Commission seemed to be also in favor of it. And then the other topic to come up, obviously, is traffic impacts. With this subdivision, no uses are being proposed. So at this point, there would not be a traffic impact study with the actual subdivision. But as each lot comes in, each lot would trigger a study to look at the intersections and determine, depending on how much use is generated on the lot, it may be several intersections get studied, or it may be a use that's so small it doesn't warrant a study. But at any rate, there would not be a traffic impact study as part of just a subdivision at this point. Those were the two major items we discussed. Now, one pretty unique situation on this one is they're going to be tying into Stewart Drive. Stewart Drive has been dedicated to the township all the way to the Corning site. However, it has only been built maybe about half the way to the Corning site, and the rest of it was never built. But we do own the right-of-way. And as part of this subdivision and land development, they will need to do a connection there. I know they were out, one of the questions is, there's a lot of stone subbase on that existing portion that was not paved, but it was stoned at one time, and they had center concrete out with their geotechnical engineer on Monday or Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah, and I met with them out there and looked at it, and it does look like at one point that thing was, had been properly stoned anyhow, so they may not have to do a full paving section, but one of the other things is they're asking for is that they would not have to do a sidewalk at that portion of the road, because the existing portion of Stewart Drive does not have a sidewalk. And once again, staff sort of feels that that makes sense. We would have them construct to the existing standards that the existing Stewart Drive has done. Now, when those lots in that area are developed, which may happen, at that point, maybe at that time, we would have them do sidewalks. But those were some of the major points. But Bob, you want to go ahead and give your presentation?
Yeah, like Dan said, Don said, it's a 12-lot, industrial, commercial subdivision. It's in the IRA. The intent is to, dedicate Summit Industrial Drive in its entirety, and then Stewart Drive, right here is the end of Stewart Drive is where the cat dealership access is, so we put in about 650 feet to get at the property line, and then, the rest of the way across there. Within the development itself, we propose, curbed roads with, sidewalks being constructed as the lots are developed. And, at the planning commission meeting, there was some discussion of when would the remaining, sidewalks be installed, and, that can be, I guess, as part of the plan. I mean, whether we get to 70% or 90% or something at some point, the rest of the sidewalks, would need to, be installed.
But I will interrupt you there because I forgot to mention that. And that was one of the things we talked about is at what percentage completion would we require that all the sidewalks be done in that subdivision. And as I had mentioned, we've done that we've allowed residential development to do sidewalks with each house going in. And it's 80%. I just dug that information out today. So like when Stearns Crossing was getting completed, once 80% of the houses were in, they had to complete the rest of the sidewalks. Now this would be more of, I think, based on a frontage, because the lots are so much different, whereas with the residential, the frontages of each of the houses is pretty much, the same, so you would go with the number, 80% number of houses, whereas at this, I think maybe we would look at 80% of a frontage being complete. But sorry to interrupt you there.
No problem. But as Don indicated, our proposal would be to, construct Summit Drive on the Stewart property to, not Summit, Stewart Drive on the Stewart property to match what was there. And then I think I know the one lot that hasn't been developed, there's already verbiage in there. Whenever it is developed, sidewalk had to be installed, and then, when those other lots would be developed, that sidewalk could be installed at that point. It's kind of an odd situation where, back in the 90s, that right-of-way was dedicated to the township and not the road being constructed. I mean, that's kind of a non-typical thing, to kind of come across. I mean, but, all in all, kind of here's, the general intent of what we're looking at doing, and if you guys have any questions or comments?
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. All right, we'll start out with Eric.
Sure. As always, we appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate you putting the effort in to spend the time with us on a sketch plan.
Thank you.
I know that should theoretically help you in the long run. I need to understand, forgive me, it's been a while since we looked at this. what's the before and after? I mean, I read the narrative, and it talks a lot about sidewalks and infrastructure, but is this the first time we're seeing the lots subdivided?
Yes, it is. Yeah, essentially, yeah. As you know, this is the former Corning site.
Right.
It was, we created an industrial revitalization area. We allowed for a mix of uses, both commercial and industrial, in that designation.
And by the way, we did that in record time.
And we did do that quickly. We've actually expanded that to also include the former CDT building as well, which is now the Stuckey Mitsubishi dealership. But this would be the first situation where, under consideration, is an actual subdivision of various sized lots.
Okay. So what we're being asked to comment on is mostly the infrastructure, because the lot lines are what you think you need.
Correct.
Which I only have two questions. First one is for Don. The backhoes and work I saw being done this week was actually on the portion of Stewart Drive that was off-site.
Yeah, that was the work I briefly mentioned, that they had the geotechnical engineer out on Wednesday doing test pits to see what is really there.
Okay, but that was
on the off-site portion.
off-site, so that matters as far as this goes? 'Cause
Well, that section was actually at one point during one of the constructions of Corning. I don't know if this was blocked, but there's a gravel driveway installed pretty much centered in the right of way, and then there's a big stockpile here, it curves down in, but it was used for either construction or getting employees in and out, or I've heard multiple stories, where like the union employees or non-union employees needed a separate entrance, or, but nonetheless, there was it's kind of grown shut now, but at one point, there was probably a 20 to 24, foot gravel driveway from the end of Stewart Drive the whole way into the site.
Can you just speak into the mic? Sorry.
Sure, sorry.
And the purpose of the work was to determine, is the stone sub-base going to be adequate enough that when they build that section of road, do they just put asphalt down?
Right. So that was really just for their own.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if there was something more important going on there.
Well, the rationale, there was a type of renovation project that was occurring at Corning that basically blocked or impeded their normal ingress and egress.
Okay.
And Corning officials had come to the township at one time and made the request because of the fact that there's a gate there to be able to make that connection, that stone neck connection, to be able to use Stewart Drive as an ingress and egress for a period of time during this particular renovation construction project. And that's why the stone base was laid, and there were some number of employees that did in fact use that in and out of the complex on a day-to-day basis for some period of time, which now escapes.
Okay. So the township has already dedicated, the stewards have already dedicated the right-of-way for the entire piece off of this site.
Yes.
So when this parcel is developed and that road is built, then the township could just go ahead and finish the connection there, because we already have the easement?
No, as part of our project, we will make the physical connection.
Okay, that's the part I didn't understand in the narrative. If what you were proposing, you were going to continue off your site all the way to the
Yes, since the county or the township already has the right-of-way for Stewart Drive, we'll be able to pave.
Okay, I apologize, that wasn't,
Sorry.
I hope that's what you were saying.
Yes.
I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay. The only other comment that I have would, as far as the sidewalks go, I don't know if 80% is a magic number. I think what's most important is that the sidewalks that would be of use early on in the multi-year phasing of this are the ones that get in first, as opposed to, piecemeal by lot, and then all of a sudden some kind of trigger that requires the other 20%. If the other 20% is up there at the end of the cul-de-sac, I think that has less value than any missing pieces that are along what we would call the cross street and then out to, there's a lot of people that walk back through there, so.
Right.
But that's a general thought. It's neither a support or, I'm neither for or against the 80% number. I would think that maybe we could come up with something, unless it's either 80% or nothing, because that's our precedent, or that's what we have
Well, that's all I have record of, and like I say, that's with residential subdivision. I don't know of any commercial/industrial subdivision where we even had sidewalks come up as an issue.
Yeah, this is somewhat unique, given the size of the site as an industrial,
Okay,
formerly industrial.
I'll give you my
site.
example. Let's say 80% of it is done, and it's the Stewart Drive and the part out to College Avenue. I don't see any reason that the developer should then have to do the other 20% up to the cul-de-sac just because they hit 80%.
Yeah.
But if the 80% would require them to fill in the pieces that are in that section, then it makes more sense. So I think I'd be more in favor of, crafting something that was.
That's really something we could look at during the
Okay.
preliminary plan phase.
Right, and I
And
was
that
going.
makes sense. I mean, that makes perfect sense. You don't need the cul-de-sac sidewalk if there's nothing back there, whereas you really would like to have the sidewalk connect to what's already been put in there at Stuckey Mitsubishi.
And Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but as each individual parcel is developed, that will require a land development plan. They'll be in here. We will have some opportunity
Yeah,
to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then
have
that gives
input
us,
on
that gives me what I think we need. Did Stuckey put a sidewalk in?
Yes, on their side,
Yes.
on their side of the driveway.
A portion of the most important piece is already done.
Right.
Okay. That's it, Dustin.
Good. Susan?
I think the questions I have are more related to helping me better understand the pedestrian facilities master plan, talking about the Stewart Road extension. And so I'm understanding that would not be paved until a certain threshold is met in terms of developing the site?
No, the paving of Stewart Road would be
Upon approval of the plan.
Okay.
Phase one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we were to approve that without sidewalks, would that be outside of the pedestrian facilities plan? And would that require some sort of action from council or, just so I understand that, because it sounds like it's outside
Sure.
what we would typically do.
Yeah, that section of Stewart wasn't contemplated as part of the pedestrian facilities master plan. Not having any idea as to when it would have been built out at the
Okay.
development of that plan, it just wasn't included. So, yeah, it would probably require some action by council to either amend or
Okay.
address through some other means.
Well, your approval of the land development plan itself would be
Okay.
able to sustain as the as the logic or the rationale behind not.
Right, and this is the sketch plan,
That's
not the
correct.
final. Yes.
That's correct.
Yes, and thank you for taking your time to come here and help us explain, understand.
No problem.
Thank you.
Good.
Good.
Rich?
Yes, as Eric said, thank you very much for bringing the sketch plan forward. Hopefully we can add value to the long term of the process. I had no real questions on that. Similar to Eric, I have a little bit of concern with the mechanics of the sidewalks finishing. I understand the logic of it, because sure enough, you'll go right across, you'll need to go right across for utilities or driveway entrance and all that good kind of stuff. My concern would be, let's say the back lots, lot 9 and 10 are developed, and then, 5 years later, 6, 7, and 8 haven't, not having that throughput to the back side. So I'm a little concerned about that just doing it as a percentage and everything, or frontage and everything. There might need some kind of time element to go with it, or some other mechanism.
Neither or, rather than just
like an either or, and then maybe at the discretion of the township, because then, you know,
Yes.
like Eric said, if it's at the end and it doesn't really
Absolutely.
make sense, it doesn't, you know, make sense.
Yeah, it's, like I said, I could see the back lots getting developed and then the ones in between never get done and we never have the continuity through it, and that would be a shame for those property owners and everything. I understand the logic at the Stewart Drive intersection with, you know, we can't require off-site improvements. We appreciate that you're finishing the road. That's gonna be a significant improvement there and everything. So that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Okay, my one question has to do with the bottom right, the parcel that's unmarked that also has an inset of the Bellefonte Borough Water Authority.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's actually all part of Lot 1. Lot 1 wraps the whole way around.
oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I was wondering what that was because it wasn't marked. Okay, and so just what Bellefonte Borough Water Authority owns is just that little square piece in the right?
Yeah, they own just where the Corning tank is, you know,
Yeah.
right there. It's just big enough, you know, for the water tank, and that's what's there.
Yeah, so my understanding was that, so that came from Bellefonte Water Authority, right? It's piped into Corning. Is that still remain an active line that's being used by that industrial park? Okay. Okay.
It's what serves the building itself. Now, you know, we would be serving, you know, using the College Township water. UAJA serves sewer to the site. You know, we're gonna be extending, you know, sewer to all the lots. All the lots except for these three here will have gravity service. Those three will have grinder pumps. So, I mean, all the utilities will be there. We'll be, you know, running them back the right of way to give, you know, and electric's kind of all through the site already with the
Okay.
substation being right on property.
Mr. Chair, we do have a representative of Bellefonte Water Authority here, as well as a representative of the Stewart family. I don't know, Ralph, if you had anything that you wanted to express or any input to the sketch plan?
Well, we're in favor of, you know, extending Stewart Drive. It seems like it makes sense for the neighborhood, so we're cooperative, we'd like to see.
Hey, Ralph, thanks for coming. Just step up.
Sure.
For CNET, thanks.
Sorry about that.
You should know that.
You should.
Good try, good try.
I just wanted to say we're cooperative in this endeavor and like to see things progress. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thanks.
Yeah, I had a comment before we get off.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Are we done with the questions? Because all I wanted to do was reference that we've been around when Corning became empty and the CDT became empty. And this could have been a bit of a blight in the township. But I want to just express my appreciation to the ownership group that took over the Corning site and the other parties, stewards, whoever else is involved, and the township. Because as Adam mentioned, you know, we worked through a rezoning request for Corning in Buzz Lightyear speed. You know, and the results, I think, speak for themselves, and again, CDT, so I just want to say that since you're here tonight, I want to express appreciation to the firm that employs you, the ownership group that employs you, and to the township staff that I think has turned what could have been, I don't want to say a blight, that might, well, no, it could have been a blight, into something I think we can all be fairly proud of, given the circumstances. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Just one more thing, Bob, from you. Just for the record, can you state your full name?
Yes, Bob Myers, Hall Baker Engineering, Project Manager.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to reports. Manager's update.
Yes, sir. Couple of items here to update with respect to the recommendation in Center Hills Village, the LTAC project. I did want to mention that, as is noted here, we did rescope, our staff did rescope the bid, the previous bid that was rejected. That has been advertised. The bids are due on May 26th, and we have had at least 3 firms, now 4 firms that have collected bid packs. So we will see how things shake out here on May 26th. Moving on, with respect to Path to Campus, this is new information that came to light just today. I had a discussion with the State College Borough manager, who has, the borough has a mutual interest in this project. One, obviously, the College Township component, but there's a logical State College Borough component as well that would involve extending that path through the Cloverleaf in the University Drive area. State College Borough presently has Delta Development under contract to do and perform a variety of functions for them in terms of soliciting grants, helping them and assisting to obtain the various grants. And the borough is agreeable to a partnership involving the borough, State College, the borough, College Township, as well as Penn State University, in hopes of pursuing a collaborative grant application, a participatory grant application that hopefully would have a much greater chance of success. So that's new information. I don't have details, but it's very promising. And in fact, as Mike can tell you, as he and I have talked about the next steps of Path to Campus, this really falls right in line with the types of recommendations that we were going to be making to council for our consideration as part of our capital improvement program and or our budgeting for coming years. So I think that this is an opportunity, and it sounds as if there is some real sincere interest, certainly in the part of the borough, as well as Penn State. The individual that we spoke to was very interested in what that particular project could do for the Penn State bike plan that has recently been put forward. So I think that we have a great opportunity here, and we'll have to pursue that in greater detail. Moving on, the last item is not on your agenda, but I did want to bring to council's attention that a sinkhole actually is developed in a shallow stormwater basin at Fogelman Field. Council will recall that College Township, while it does not own the property is actually owned by the State College Area School District, but College Township has a longer-term lease on that property, and College Township, in conjunction with some additional funding partners, did pay for improvements that were made at Fogelman Field and creating the fields that are there now and the walking trail. State College Area School District actually discovered it, and State College School District has actually moved forward in terms of securing some estimates for the repair of that. I've had conversations with the school district. Given the fact that we developed the parcel, we developed that particular stormwater feature, we will pay for those improvements that are necessary, repairs that are necessary there. But the school district has gone ahead and secured some quotes for that work. So I just wanted to make sure the council was aware of that. I'm expecting that those quotes would probably cost us about $30,000 to complete the repair properly. This particular area or location is relatively close to the boundary of Fogelman Field with Spring Creek Estates. So it's relatively close to some of the residential homes that we have there. So I just wanted to be sure the council was aware of that, and we'll have more information as things move forward. And that's my report.
Okay, questions for the manager? Anyone? Okay. So just on that sinkhole, just to put it in perspective, right? So that would be if I was standing at Spring Creek School at my right, where that main entrance is in the Fogelman Fields, that would be at the far back.
Far back left.
On the left, yeah. Okay.
It's a relatively shallow stormwater basin.
It's a glorified rain garden. I mean, it's a small basin.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, excellent, thank you. All right, moving on to COG Regional County and Liaison Reports. So we'll start out with Susan.
Okay, I'm reporting out on the COG Public Safety Committee meeting. We met on the 9th. We had a couple of topics we covered. Sean Kaufman, or I'm sorry, Scott Rawson reported out and gave us an annual update on the emergency medical services. I won't go through all the statistics, that's in my report, but ambulance calls have been up in the region, and they have fewer volunteer hours, and that's because they've had the opportunity to hire and for paid positions some of those volunteers. And so the College Township represents about 21% of ambulance calls. The borough is the only township that has more. Scott did point out to us that Center Lifelink is one of the 4 services accredited by a commission on accreditation of ambulance services in Pennsylvania. And that actually has helped them in the past when they did transports for Geisinger. They didn't have to meet Geisinger requirements. So it doesn't improve things like reimbursements for ambulance services, but it is something that they've maintained. One of the things that they highlighted for us is that obviously there's a shortage of EMS volunteers across the state, across the country. And one of the things that they're looking at townships to consider would be possibly sponsoring a training course for an EMT. So that costs about $1,200, and they do put on those training courses. So in the future, that may be something we want to discuss. And what they would do is they would put that student through the training course and then require that they give back a certain amount of service, a year or 2 of service. Otherwise, they would pay back the fee for the training. Penn State Ambulance also reported back out to us. They have also had a 20% increase in ambulance calls. Port Matilda came out. Scott Woodring, the vice president, came out and spoke with us. And they're getting quite a bit more membership just as a result of all the publicity, all the press coverage on the challenges that they've had out in their ambulance service. They have a new board. They're restructuring with new bylaws, so they hope that some of the problems they've had in the past should be addressed. They do have a CPA now who's working on finances for them. Walt, who's here, Walt and Sean Kaufman brought forward a proposal for a new position, shared position between Center Region Code Authority and also the Alphas. And that would be a position that would include a firefighter component with a fire inspector position. So a 50-50 split in job responsibilities. And that position would report to the Code Authority, and that would be split across time. And really, basically, what Sean and Walt were doing is describing the way the position could work. And that would address some of the shortages, the gap shortages that we have now, having firefighters on site in stations to respond to calls. And that's at the sort of, beginning exploration phase, and they'll be forwarding that to the HR committee. And then one last item, which I didn't include in the report. I did submit an attachment to the report. I shared with you that staffing plan, so if you're interested in the details, that's included. That was something that Sean and Walt had shared with us. The fire director search is going well. Pam Robb, our chair, did bring up that she had concerns about safety plans for public meetings. And so she is talking with Sean Kaufman about better understanding how public officials are and elected officials are protected in different different public meetings. One of the recommendations from one of the police officers, the borough police officers, was to consider greeters at our meetings, that there wouldn't be enough police staffing to provide security, but that we might want to consider in the future things like greeters. So that's my update.
Anything else?
Any questions?
Questions for Susan?
Go ahead. I'll go first. All right. First of all, I thought the $1,200, the idea of township sponsoring, I thought that was great, creative. I mean, we have to do something. That's a good starting point. The last page under the new position where it says next steps, the third bullet is determine financial requirements for the new position. Does that involve us?
I don't believe it does. I believe this is staffing through Alpha, and, the staffing would go through Alpha. I'll be honest, I don't know the.
Right, because the next bullet is review by municipalities and finance committee, and I'm thinking that's,
I think that's part of the HR process to go back and approve. Walt is here. Okay.
because it's a position supported by both departments already.
Exactly. So it would go through, you would probably be more familiar with the process going through HR and then coming back for approval, so.
Yeah, just to the General Assembly, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, general.
that's all that means
Yep.
then. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it, please.
Rich, any questions?
Yes, to Eric's, the creative on the Center Lifelink, I like that. I also like the creative approach to the firefighter, fire inspector attack. That was, I think that is very well done. Appreciated the staffing plan. Towards that, I'm seeing next steps, Public Safety Committee endorsement of the staffing concept. Did Public Safety endorse?
That was a little controversial. Somebody had forwarded a motion to pass, and then we decided not to do it through that process. So we did recommend that go to the HR committee next. So it was a more informal recommendation rather than a motion and a second and a vote.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So it was the order of the process, not the position itself?
there were some concerns. One of the committee members had a concern that if we passed a motion to send it on to the HR committee, that could imply full endorsement from the committee.
Okay.
And so it was the end of the meeting, and the decision was made to give direction to Sean and to Walt to take that next steps to the HR committee.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So you're the HR guy. You get
So
to
you get it
you're
next to do
next.
now.
Yeah,
You'll be next.
eventually I think it'll end up at finance. I'm just out there
Yeah,
on
I
a limb
think
there,
that's
but I bet
exactly
it'll end up there.
So it's
Did you want to
So
add anything, Walt?
I'm perfectly content to wait my turn.
Walt may have something to add.
Well, please, thank you.
Not a problem, my pleasure. Just point of clarification, it's actually looking at truly 4 positions. So there's 4 staff members that we're talking about. Financially, they'd be split 50-50 between the Center Region Code Administration and the Fire Administration, then would reimburse the Code Administration for half the cost, with each of us having half the time of the inspectors. And the Public Safety Committee basically endorsed the very early concept and asked us to continue working and come back to them at the next meeting with additional information.
Thank you.
Walt, if you could, please, your full name and position.
Yes, I'm Walter Schneider. I'm the Agency Director for Center Region Code Administration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, again, I think it's very creative. I think it's leveraging assets in both arenas, and I look forward to it making its rounds to finance, and then ultimately general forum.
All right. Rich, great segue. Reports, did you have any meetings?
Yes, there was a joint Finance and Facilities meeting on May 11th. Primary items were the review of the capital improvement plan comments received back from the municipalities. Unfortunately, we didn't get the one municipality's comments till at the time of the meeting, so staff was still working to assemble all of those and respond appropriately. One of the things I suggested was we need to look at timing so that staff has the ability to properly respond to the things. There was definitely some philosophical stuff that hit the thing. In my time in COG Finance, it's gone from we gotta smooth, to okay, let's go peaks and valleys, Personally, I think it's somewhere in between some things are smooth, some things peak and valley and stuff like that. There was a motion made, seconded, and approved by the joint committee to seek Hess Field prioritization in the capital improvement plan. Interesting vote. It was a 5-1 of the facilities committee members and a 3-3 vote of the finance committee members. Passes 8-4 through that, but some of it was philosophical on that, in that we were getting in the authority's business, the Center Region Parks and Rec Authority's business. And then one was just, I think, prioritization that don't do parks, but at any rate, we'll be seeing that come back through again at the general forum. The other action item was the energy procurement agreement. The solar purchase power is taking a little bit longer than anticipated as you try to get 15 entities on the same legal status and all that good stuff. So that there was a need to extend the COG supplier purchase agreement, and it was recommended to extend that through the end of the year. And then hopefully that'll all be in place. That's pretty.
Questions for Rich? Any?
Just a quick comment.
Comments?
Depending upon the length of time that it takes for these contracts on solar power purchasing to be returned for consideration by individual municipalities, College Township is likely going to have to do something similar. And it may be for, rather than just the end of the year, it could be for another full year. So just keeping that in mind, and that is predicated on how our rates may be structured and the best available, most advantageous deal that is available to us.
One caveat to that. So one of the decisions was, do we extend with our COG's current provider or go with Direct Energy, who is going to be the partner in the solar power purchasing agreement? And the recommendation was to go with the new entity because we're all going to end up there anyway. So College Township and the Water Authority may be asked to do similar. As we all know, the school district's really driving this train, and that's what they're doing. They're extending, but they're moving over to Direct Energy. So, thank you.
Thanks. Eric?
Rich covered the facilities joint meeting with finance, which is good since I wasn't there. The only meeting, I haven't had any meetings, however, I do have a meeting with the consultant that MPO is working with through PennDOT to develop the MPO strategic plan, to review the final draft on Monday, with the hope that it will be presented then to the MPO in June for adoption. Nothing to report above and beyond what I've been providing incremental updates on. Just a reminder that this draft does not include any structural changes to the coordinating committee. However, it does suggest some fundamental changes to the way the tech committee will operate, hopefully for the better. And it will suggest that the MPO budget for additional staff and additional contracted help to attempt to leverage some of the available funding, some of the funding that's become available through the bill legislation and the Inflation Reduction Act. The contracted funding, the funding for contracted help would be something similar to what Adam was referring to that we could use jointly with the borough and Penn State to access discretionary funding for our Path to Campus. But if all goes well, those elements will be included in the strategic plan. The MPO will hopefully adopt it, and then we'll have a plan to guide us forward in this unprecedented time of, say, infrastructure funding opportunity.
Anything for Eric? Okay, I had 2 meetings. I was able to attend one of them. Yesterday, the IDA, the College Township IDA did meet. I did not make that meeting. I think, and I'll defer to the manager, but I think the majority of what we need to talk about is in our consent agenda as far as the executive director. I did have a Spring Creek Watershed Commission meeting last evening, and I did send a report out late. It didn't make it into the packet. The biggest thing I just want to note on that is we now have a treasurer. There was actually never officially a treasurer, if you remember correctly, when we approved the new bylaw, or when we gave the feedback and the commission approved its new bylaws, there's a treasurer. So Kevin Abbey is the treasurer out of Ferguson Township, and he's been doing a pretty thorough finance review and kind of going back through, and it was discovered that, through basically essentially an audit, that a number of municipal contributions and invoices have still remained open. And so I just wanted to bring to our attention that we had one that is showing that we did not pay for 2022's contribution. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I think staff's been contacted already, right?
Yeah, well, Don was able to inform me of that this morning.
He beat me.
The biggest issue there is if we received an invoice, it was paid. If we did not receive an invoice, in all likelihood, it was not paid. So as soon as we receive an invoice, we can get that corrected.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll just kind of pass along to Kevin to reach back out and say, that may very likely be the case that there was not an invoice sent out. Yeah. It's probably most likely the case. There was quite a few 2022 invoices that were still open. Yeah. Okay, that's all I had for reports. Any questions to me? All right, moving on to staff, PC, and other committee reports, and I was informed that PC had nothing to report, so. Anything else? Staff or other committee reports? Okay. All right, diversity, equity, and inclusion reports, and also members of the public are invited to come up to the podium as well if they have something they'd like to say.
Nothing to report on my end this evening.
Okay. Council, anybody else? Okay. Okay, we will move on to our consent agenda. Our consent agenda consists of CA1, the minutes, approval of our May 1st, 2023 CIP special meeting. CA1B, the May 4th, 2023 regular meeting minutes. CA2 is correspondence in receipt and approval of. Letter A is an email from Rachel Avila dated May 8th, 2023 regarding Cub Scouts Pack 67. Letter B is a letter from the Center County Commissioners dated April 19th, 2023 regarding broadband update. Letter C is an email from Wayne Pauley dated May 10th, 2023 regarding the official map. D is an email from Dave Fonash, is that correct?
Fonish.
Bonish? From the Celtic or Celtic? Celtic Soccer Board President dated May 11th, 2023 regarding equitable use of Fogelman Field. Invitation E is an invitation from Clearwater Conservancy dated May 10th, 2023 to the Rockenbeck Property Open House. Letter F is an email from David Schulte dated May 16th, 2023 regarding a change to the official map. CA3 is an action item and an approval of A resolution R-23-13, the CATA local share, and B is the CTIDA, the College Township Industrial Development Authority Executive Director Agreement with College Township. Do any members of council wish to pull any of these items? Rich, you can go ahead, Rich.
Actually, my question was on the minutes, CA2B. I don't think it needs pulled, but I just wanted to point out that under old business OB1 Surrey Hills Village Traffic Calming Bid Award, usually when we take action, the minutes reflect the vote. This one made no reference to the vote.
Ooh.
So I think without pulling it, maybe we could accept that with the understanding that the minutes would be
amended.
We'll amend it to reflect the actual vote, which was a 4-1 vote.
Right, but it's not the number, it's the fact that
It's
there's always a reference to the
Absolutely.
vote. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good catch, thank you.
Okay.
And then CA2D, since it appears we may have someone here for that.
Rich, you wish to pull anything?
Right, well, just a general comment, CA2A, I think is in the hands of our chair and the manager in agenda. B is asking for a letter of support, so I think we have to we should pull that one to discuss. And then I also was gonna do CA2D.
D.
So I have CA2B and D so
Correct.
far. Okay, Susan?
And CA3B, the CTIDA Executive Director
Okay.
Agreement.
All right. And I would like to, I don't want to pull CA2C, I just want to acknowledge that we will discuss it later on in the agenda. So this action is just accepting the letter.
Similar with F, similar with F.
Yeah, yeah. And then, I just want to add a note that if you haven't had a chance for E to go to the Rockenbeck property, do it. It's pretty cool. And that, remember, we have township land that also borders their land, right, along Spring Creek. So then I am not going to pull anything else. So I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda minus CA2B, D, and CA3B.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Okay, passes. All right, so.
The third of the 3 open houses is right before our next council meeting on that Rockenbeck.
Yeah.
And there's one tomorrow night.
Okay, so we will discuss B first, CA2B. Rich, right?
Right, that's the letter from the Board of Commissioners regarding broadband update. They are asking for a letter of support from the municipality towards that, and I would ask what staff's thoughts are.
Sure. We included it so the council was aware of it. I kind of assumed that this would be something that we would be writing in support of. We can take care of that, fairly standard type of a letter that we will write in these circumstances unless council wishes to review it before it goes out.
I have no need to review it before, but I thought council could have an opportunity if there was something specific they might want to get into that letter of support. I don't have anything to offer myself. The standard fare will do well for me. That's all I have.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, the information included in CA2D didn't really define what the arrangement is, and I suspect also the school district is involved in that, if I remember correctly. There's a complex kind of arrangement, partnership, even just between the township and the school district, and then you enter into, you throw center soccer in on top of it. I just wanted to try to understand what that was.
Yeah, one of the additional pieces of information that was provided in your packet in relation to the letter that was received from Mr. Fonesh what happens to be a piece of correspondence that I had drafted in July 7th of 2003 to then chair of Center Soccer, which was Martin Bradley. And basically, just to back up just for a moment to give you the overview, as I actually stated earlier in the manager's update, State College Area School District owns the property where Fogelman Fields is located. But College Township is a 25-year lease on that piece of property, which will be coming due here probably in the next 18 months to 24 months as far as the possible extension of that lease agreement. At the time, rather than part with the property, the school district was interested in retaining that, knowing that they were going to be involved in a very extensive facilities master planning process, which we now know has kind of culminated in the development and the expansion of what was Hauserville Elementary School, now Spring Creek Elementary School, et cetera, et cetera. But at the time that this agreement was negotiated, the school district was not interested in selling the property to College Township. So the arrangement was made for the township to lease the property for a period of time from the school district. And again, we're still operating under that the existing original 25-year lease. The township put in approximately, of its own money, $600,000 to $700,000 worth of improvements for the development of the 3 fields and the walking path at Fogelman Field. There was also an additional contribution from Center Soccer at the time of $150,000. All of that money was spent toward the improvements that were made there. And as a result of that, which is reflected in the previously referenced July 7th, 2003 letter, council wanted to acknowledge the contributions made by Center Soccer Association and basically provided that it was their expressed intention that the council, in recognition of their contribution, that Center Soccer be granted priority scheduling for the use of what was known at the time as Hauserville Park Fields. So that is the total sum of documentation relative to how the fields were to be used. The administrative process in terms of the use of the fields, as well as ongoing maintenance and upkeep of the facilities, was then passed from College Township to Center Region Parks and Recreation. And Center Region Parks and Recreation took care of all, and does still take care of all of the various scheduling that occurs for those fields, and for a number of fields.
Just like Spring Creek.
Just like Spring Creek, etc. So it operates no differently in that fashion. The only other piece of information to provide to council is that subsequent to the 2003 contribution from Center Soccer, Center Soccer also provided funding post-construction for the installation of underground sprinkler systems in approximately the 2008-2009 time period, in an amount of about $50,000 for those installations. College Township's contribution to that particular phase of the project was actually limited to, it's kind of a barter situation here, limited to the acquisition of a specialized mower that was to be used, purchased by College Township for use by Parks and Recreation to mow the fields. At an approximate cost of $30,000. So since 2003, Center Soccer has provided about $200,000 worth of funds into that Fogelman Field complex. So, but again, the only reference that exists is the 2003 letter relative to scheduling priority for Center Soccer events.
So, I understand that then. The township has not provided Center Region Park and Rec with any kind of guidance or anything as far as, so it's left.
Nothing beyond what was given in 2003.
I'm sorry, so currently, they are determining what level what level of priority that the private association gets in relationship to this facility. And I suspect that there are other have been other private contributions to other regional parks in the past where there is a similar type of arrangement?
That I don't know.
Okay.
And I don't know of any specifically.
I'm just wondering if there is a chart, if there's some kind of guideline that they're using that they can refer to that, or is it just a kind of on the fly they make that determination? And those aren't questions I expect that you to have the answer to. I'm just floating them out there that we've opened this up, but apparently it appears to be a little loose in the administration of it.
Well, it just seems like we have, there should be someone else in the room, right, from the Center Region Parks, right, to talk about this at this point, but are you aware they have any documentation with Center Soccer? As far as?
They have this letter.
That is it. Okay.
And that's it. Yeah.
I bring this up because in our discussions when we were doing the open space and park what did we spend 2 years doing?
Comprehensive plan?
The comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive.
Yeah, one of the things that the elected officials were really pushing for was a business plan. One that actually documented or provided a policy for when private dollars are used to sponsor elements of parks, what they would get in return. And, that didn't get done. And I think that's more of an operational thing that now falls to staff. But clearly, here's an example of that, long before it came up, as you don't want to turn that money away, but at the same time, you don't have any experience or any precedent or anything to guide what you're giving in return, and here we are now
So
revisiting it.
is Mr. Fonash here?
Yeah. So before we do that, is there any other
Sorry.
council comments?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Again, I was going to bring it up and ask for it to be on a future agenda.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
And I think we have some pieces that we, in the process, we need to get it. There's what does priority consideration mean? As an example. The length of agreement. So this is what the 2003 letter was, their discussion at the meetings around those that gave some format to that.
Right, and very notable, there is no time frame on that letter.
Exactly, which from a legal standpoint makes it a little, so that leads to the solicitor. I think he needs to opine in on what we can and can't do based on this document. And then, as I think one of you said about a representative of the Parks Agency, what are they doing? How are they interpreting priority consideration? How are they building that into what they do and everything? I don't think the school district really has a spot.
And just a point of clarification, the school district really has nothing at all to do with this. They happen to own the property, but we lease it, we've built the improvements, this is our park. That said, the one thing that was retained as part of the lease with the school district is that the ultimate priority for use of the fields is if in the event that the school district needed to use those facilities for some reason, that they would receive priority to do so. That has happened on one occasion, and again, it was not during the recent constructions, it was previous, but there was an issue that he had developed on one of the soccer fields, or one of the rectangular fields that was being used by the school district elsewhere, that required them to actually utilize for practices, and I believe actually some interscholastic games, Fogelman Field.
Right.
But that only happened on 1 year for a number of weeks.
Okay, yeah, let's wrap this up. I think let's just get a quick straw poll as far as adding it to a future agenda, based off what Rich had said, and essentially if we can get some more information from CRPR, if we can get if they have a priority matrix, right? If we can get, who else do we need to sit at the table on this one? I guess probably center soccer, right?
The solicitor needs to
Then the
opine
solicitor,
on
run
that.
across
And
by
then
the solicitor.
Eric's point, or Adam's point about the lease, our lease with the school district, what does that restrict us or allow us to do or not do?
Looks like we have somebody online too, so we'll get a quick straw poll, then we'll go to public comment on this. Future agenda item?
Yes,
Rich?
yes, please.
Yes, Susan, I'm on board with that. So we had somebody raise their hand online, but I want to give the opportunity to Mr. Fonash as well. If he wants to speak to this, he could just go to the podium.
So Dave is not here.
Okay.
My name's Owen Griffin, I'm the technical.
Go ahead to the podium, please. Yep. Yeah, and just state your full name and in your association.
Hi, thank you for hearing me. My name's Owen Griffith. I'm the technical director for Celtic Soccer Club. We are a 501c organization. We, since that letter, were founded in 2011, and we've since grown to over 200 kids. We've got teams from 7 all the way up to, I think, U18. And we make up, I guess, kind of the travel select team, soccer team in State College. Whereas CSA is kind of, they're kind of like the recreational portion of soccer. So we compete statewide, we compete in the region. We've got a couple kids who have signed for Division III and Division I soccer programs. This year, 9 out of the 11 starting players on the State College varsity high school team were current Celtic members. So we are an organization that is developing young people and contributing to kind of the reputation of State College School District and State College athletics. And I think our biggest thing with this, which you guys said very well, was that we're just trying to understand whether this letter is enforceable in terms of the continued priority use and scheduling of CSA at Fogelman. We're currently kind of spread out at a bunch of different facilities across town and just kind of piecing together the schedule and making it work. And I think Fogelman is recognized as kind of the best facility, the most attractive facility in the area. And with our mass of players and the type of young people and players that we're producing, we're hoping to use it and hoping to just understand, again, what does that priority scheduling mean? Does it mean that we can use it in conjunction with CSA? Does it mean that we are unable to use it until a certain time? But hopefully at some point be able to at least share that space. So.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, comments, questions?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what you said, because 15 years ago, you could have taken exactly what you said and substituted center soccer for Celtic, because they were the competitive travel league, and probably 80% of the high school players came up through. So what you're saying is your club has now taken that role, and they have become more of a...
Well, the center soccer still has both. They have recreational. And
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think we're in a position to choose between competing and private entities, but I just wanted to mention that I think you might be selling center soccer a little short there.
Yeah.
Sure, and that wasn't meant to be any like hierarchical in any way. That was more just we're kind of doing something a little bit different to them in terms of what our main mission is. But to your point, they still do have travel programs.
My point was, we were looking at them as you 15
Sure.
years ago when we made this. So I mean, if you weren't in the picture, but center soccer was doing exactly what you were doing. So it seemed a pretty noble endeavor at the time, I'm sure.
Certainly, and we're to be clear, we're quite friendly with them. I think that the kind of issue is that we have had no luck with Center Parks and Recreation in getting any sort of answers of how we could use the facility with them. It's kind of been, well, center soccer has priority, and so 5 days a week you may not practice there, but that field does sit empty for some of those days. So.
I did want to follow up on that. You have no access at all to the field?
Correct. We've asked and then we've said
Okay, I can tell you that the concept of priority scheduling did not contemplate exclusivity.
Yeah.
That, and you may have to take my word for that, at least here this evening.
Well, just quick on that note, I mean, from what we've presented, I mean, I'll just be first to say that doesn't indicate exclusivity to me at all. Would everyone, do you agree? Does anybody, I see head nods on that. So, I mean,
it's a different definition of priority.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I would request then that maybe perhaps we just make a call to, park agency and be like, hey, you still have to allow access until we figure out long-term what to do.
In the interim, before
in
we
the
take
interim,
this up.
And I would like to add that I think at the time that this was done, there might not have been the understanding that there would be clubs that would develop over time in response to a growth in population, a change in demand. So understanding better when we set a limit on priority scheduling, but certainly not exclusive.
Go ahead, Rich.
I was just I think that's great interim action. I think we have an agreement that with no expiration.
Yes, exactly.
So we still need to get that answer.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there.
Okay.
Interim action, manager, please make a call. That's not the intent. Thanks for bringing that up.
I'm glad
was
that
good.
came out.
Yeah, I'm glad you came
Awfully
out.
close to getting through this without that.
Any other questions or comments?
You may have to forgive my ignorance, but and Omari may kick me for.
Omari Omari had their hand up.
Yeah.
So.
But I did also want to mention, and this may be unrelated, but just because you brought up CRPR and their role in kind of the scheduling process. The same thing has also happened to us with Circleville, which we don't obviously have a letter that indicates any sort of financial contribution for the development or maintenance of Circleville, but same thing. CSA does have currently, according to CRPR, priority use there too as well. I don't actually know if that falls within College Township, so.
That's Patton Township, right?
But anyway, thank you.
One alibi. Isn't it great that we have a regional park coming online very soon that has some rectangular fields?
Yeah.
To try to help this. So,
Well, there is an opportunity there, yeah.
imagine
Right?
that.
For contributions still, right? Yeah. Omari, did you want to speak?
I don't have anything to add. This was fantastic discussion. Really appreciate you guys hearing the O and out and coming with some actions, tangible actions moving forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so nothing further on D. We'll move on to CA3B.
I think there's somebody else who has
Okay,
more
sorry.
comment for public comment.
Yeah, just very briefly. I don't have a lot of additional substance
But
to add.
just state your name and your
I'm Bo
organization.
Cleveland, and I have kids who play soccer in the area. Moved here 16 years ago. We've been involved in multiple clubs. I spent the last 8 years driving out pretty far away to Fairbrook. And it would be great to actually have access for the Celtics. It's a great club. They give a lot to the community. They're really investing a lot in the kids. And I think people have said really important things about, priority does not mean exclusivity. That's really important. And also we have a perpetuities issue, which needs to be clarified. And it would just be great if I could drive 4 minutes rather than 20 minutes. Because I've been doing this for 8 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll move on to CA3B. All right, Susan, you requested this.
Yeah, I don't know the history, and so it would help me to understand. Some of the concerns that I had reading through the information that we were given is that the executive director position has been open for over a year. They're opening the search now, and there have been requests for continuations for services, initially not reimbursed, now reimbursed. So I would like to understand better the history, and also you had mentioned that you're part of that committee, just getting some background on that, or Adam's background.
My first question on this is just a clarification, right? So we have a suggested motion as part of your memorandum.
Yeah.
So should it be pulled out of the consent agenda separately with that motion?
Well, in the way that we've handled these extensions over the last couple of cycles has simply been as part of the consent agenda.
Okay.
And the acceptance or your approval, if you will, of
All
the
right.
action item essentially extended to this extension.
Yeah, and I would definitely defer to Adam just to talk to this a little bit more in detail. But as the liaison, the search started probably about 2 months now, right, Adam? Ago.
Yeah, well, the initial, yes.
The initial process.
Right,
yeah.
the initial process. So, by way of background, in February of 2022, I'm sorry, actually in January of 2022, an executive director for the IDA was hired. That person submitted a resignation in February of 2022, stemming from some difficult organizational interactions at the IDA. And in May of 2022, it was brought to council's attention, it had been brought to council's attention prior to that point, but one of the solutions or one of the ways to help clear up some of those difficulties was to appoint township manager as an interim executive director. And for those services at approximately 25 hours a month, the IDA would in fact reimburse College Township for that time. That has been happening. Those invoices have been issued, they have been paid. So as far as the IDA is current with those actions. What is unfolded here over the last year and a few months is a very long and relatively painful process of kind of getting the direction of the IDA reset, which included a complete renovation of their bylaws, which we have seen here previously, and some extensive work relative to setting up an organizational process involving committees and process flow. Those are things that I have worked on with the IDA to get them to the point where they now, within the last few weeks, are really in a position now to construct a job description and move forward with a search. They have selected a search firm to assist them in the recruiting. There are some details that need to be provided to the search firm to enable them to move forward. I will advise council in advance, one of the only model that actually makes sense for the IDA in terms of hiring the type of an executive director that they are looking at. And they are looking at a full-time, 40-hour-a-week executive director, is to utilize the existing College Township Water Authority model that exists between College Township and College Township Water Authority. And for those that may not be familiar with that particular model, College Township Water Authority has no employees. They have a contract with College Township. All the employees are College Township employees that are dedicated to that work. I suspect that at the June 1st meeting, based on actions that occurred yesterday, that there will be a agenda item for council to discuss and to consider a similar type of an arrangement for another College Township employee that would serve as the executive director for the College Township Industrial Development Authority. So that is forthcoming. And again, that has to deal with some budgetary restrictions. Moreover, it has to do with the availability and the ability to be able to offer benefits to this employee.
All right, and I would just add, I have no issue with the extension. There is forward progress on this, much more than there has been in the last extensions, right? But I guess I would offer that I kind of feel like it's time that we just stop giving the option of extensions within our agreement. And with that, I would be willing to offer to say, just take it through the end of the year. I mean, but that's all I have to say about it. Anybody else? Any comments, Rich?
Yeah, well, I would ask does it help to take it through the end of the year? It's not that complicated a process to extend it. I would also offer that I've actually used the College Township Water Authority model in my discussions in parks governance as a way for the parks agency to be operating with the parks authority as a good, successful business practice way of doing it. So I see that, but only I trust Adam and staff's judgment on whether that's good. I'm not gonna lie, it gives me a lot of comfort if I know that guy and I know all of these folks and what they bring to the table. So I would support that if that was a viable option. And I assume that if you brought somebody on board to fill most of those duties, they'd also find some duties in the rest of the township that would probably move the entire organization forward.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, they could chase down some grants for us, right?
I think there would definitely be some synergy.
I exactly what Rich said.
Wow. Okay. Susan, anything else?
Nothing else.
He used the S word.
Okay. Well, I'll accept a motion to approve these three items, FECA 2B, D, and B.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries. We're done with the consent agenda. On to old business. OB1 Shiloh Road zoning amendment. This is discussion and action required. Mr. Bloom.
All right, give that a second to transition. Okay. So full disclosure, I'm pinch hitting tonight on behalf of Lindsay. Her and I have worked pretty closely on developing this memo as well as the presentation that we have for tonight. I will beg your indulgence because there's a lot there. As you could tell from the memo, there is a lot there to be discussed, and really the presentation walks pretty consistently through the memo, but I think it merits having that up on the screen for all to kind of see and understand where we're coming from. So this agenda item deals with a Shiloh Road zoning amendment, potential for a zoning amendment. So before we get to the recommendations that you'll see before you, I want to take a step backwards to how we got here to begin with. So again, I think I used the term last time, we'll get in the Wayback Machine for a minute. A little background on Dale Summit. So currently the Dale Summit is comprised of traditional zoning districts, 10 of them, pretty rigidly defined by land use. What we've seen out here over the last 20 years is a significant number of impacts to what we termed in the Dale Summit Area Plan as defining developments. Specifically, the Corning plant, which we talked about this evening, at one time was one of the top employers in the center region. Obviously, that closure was a major blow to the regional economy, and despite the efforts of all parties involved, we haven't ascended back to that level to date in terms of employment. Correspondingly, we've also seen the Nittany Mall follow the national trend for retail, and that specifically being a decline. And while we've had some reinvestment in the Nittany Mall, it's kind of that second or third generation of retail development, and then no longer those real true anchor stores that we saw at one time, the Macy's, the Sears, those types of developments. There's some great employers out there, great stores, but it's a little different scale in terms of impact to the Dale Summit specifically. In terms of development, we have seen over those 20 years kind of a slow, fragmented development. At times it's a little streaky. We've had some streaky development here as of late, but the development that has occurred has had some significant impacts to the sense of place in Dale Summit, as well as what we consider the overall vitality. At one time that was a vibrant kind of activity center, and now it's there and we're not really drawing a lot of activity unless you're kind of purposely going to the stores or specific locations. This township has taken a lot of pains in trying to understand that issue as well as address it. So we have really 4 key activities. Back in 2004, there was an economic impact study of the Shiloh Road land use options. 2017 forward planning study that was specific to industrial and commercial zoning. 2021 was the development of the draft Dale Summit Area Plan, and that one becomes very important to what happens moving forward. And then presently, we are in the process of development of a form-based code specific to Dale Summit. Dale Summit Area Plan establishes a vision. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to underscore that it's trying to get back at some of those issues that we've identified with how development has occurred. How do we turn Dale Summit into an attractive and instantly recognizable place within the larger context of the township, the region, and the county? Things that the community, and at the time of the development, the committee wasn't envisioning, was that activity hub that this area once was. Vibrant, economically prosperous, equitable, environmentally sustainable. And again, we go into talk a little bit more about how you can handle that through some proactive planning and well-tailored regulations. When we talk kind of those broad statements, things that we've talked about in a lot of what we do here, specifically CIP, strategic planning, those kind of elements, that's kind of the broad statement, and then you whittle that down through objectives and strategies. Some of the strategies specific to Dale Summit that were identified in the draft plan, adding rooftops to drive revitalization. When the committee was working on this, one of the things that they referenced was what happened in kind of the North Atherton corridor in Patton Township, and what is really spurring some of that development energy that's happened there. And one of the things that you could point to was the direct access to residential areas. You have the Park Forest area, the new developments and around. So one of the implementation steps under this objective was adjust the regulations to allow for higher densities and expanded mixed use in certain transects. And transects is an important term used in form-based code. There's a couple other implementation steps there that talk a little bit about how else could you kind of incentivize or build towards adding rooftops. This one wasn't mentioned in the memo, but as I was going through and developing the presentation, it kind of jumped off the page. Form-based code specifically works towards a human-scale type development. That's one of the things that was addressed as an objective specific into the Dale Summit Area Plan, and in particular incorporating design standards into the existing and future ordinances, as well as any associated regulations. That kind of quickly led into allowing flexibility within regulations, something that we've heard on numerous occasions as that sporadic development has happened out here in the Dale Summit, is that the regulations currently in place are pretty rigid and actually a little onerous as the developers try to work through development within this larger area. So one of the things that was addressed in terms of an implementation step was evaluate existing regulations to determine if modifications are needed. Hold that one in the back of your mind for a minute. The last thing I will reference here was kind of where we got to that process of presently working towards form-based code. One of the implementation objectives or strategies was the regulation on form as opposed to use. When council saw the draft Dale Summit Area Plan, the folks that were at the table at that time latched onto this in particular and said, in order to really realize the vision and the objectives within the Dale Summit Area Plan, this is kind of that first thing that needs to jump off the page. It started with an educational process of council as well as planning commission. That quickly led into consultant selection process, and as I note there, in fall of '22, DPZ Co-Design was selected as our consultant to start working through the development of a form-based code. You're going to hear a lot about that in the coming months of where DPZ is at in terms of their work. Matter of fact, you'll hear an announcement soon about charrettes that they'll be looking at to, again, have some more community discussion about the future of Dale Summit. They are also working through the refinement of the transect mapping. And again, that's kind of important to think of. If you think of Dale Summit as kind of a quilt and how it's all weaved together, that's what transect is all about. How do you make those kind of what is currently rigid, squares of land use, how do you weave those together and make them cohesive and flow between different types? And then finally, also underway is craft the development and adopt a new form-based code for the Dale Summit, whatever form that may take as they get through their process. Pretty important stuff, but you can see how the Dale Summit plan has kind of informed and moved us forward to this point. On the heels of that discussion with council, there was the recognition that we needed consulting help. We know what we don't know when it comes to form-based code. So there was an issuance of a request for qualifications that ultimately led to the hiring of DPZ. And one of the things I wanted to underscore in that RFQ was the acknowledgement that every scope of work needs to outline an incorporated work task of identifying interim revisions to current regulations. During the development of that RFQ, it was a recognition that this process is going to take a while and that development may occur in the Dale Summit. So what can we do in the interim to move towards momentum and cohesion of what we envision out here in the future? So that was one of the key tasks that was underscored. Matter of fact, in the RFQ itself, it talked about a lot of flexibility in the scope of work with the exception of this. This was a critical work task that said every one of the scopes of work that's developed and submitted for this has to talk about this and provide some strategy for addressing interim regulation changes. Move forward a little bit. As this process is starting to get some legs underneath it, we get a zoning amendment request. Pantera, on behalf of their client Burkentine Real Estate, approached the township Burkentine has taken an option on a Shiloh Road tax parcel 19259 with the desire to develop a mixed-use development, one of higher density multifamily as well as some other uses associated with this. Again, mixed-use development itself. That tax parcel sits in the planned research and business district, which does not allow for residential and an important element, planned residential development, or PRD. The request that came from Pantera specifically said, asked the township to consider amending Chapter 145-17A to permit PRBD district as a base zone for a planned residential development with the same density allowed under the multifamily district R3 of 22 units per acre. So again, this is all kind of important because it's just this sequencing of events that has happened. This request was ultimately remanded. Council had a chance to review it going back early this year, January, February timeframe. It might have been an early February meeting. And at the time issued a remand letter to PC. And I'm not going to read everything that's on here, but I am going to note that first block. College Township Council specifically noted, we should never consider a rezoning based strictly on an individual development proposal without considering the larger ramifications. That said, Council recognized that this was a unique opportunity given the work that was happening with the draft Dale Summit Area Plan and that momentum towards form-based code, that this proposal that was coming forward from the developer could be a demonstration or catalyst project that kind of shows what the future of the Dale Summit could look like under a form-based code. Other things that you referenced was leveraging the expertise of DPZ. This is a great tool to have in our toolbox. We wouldn't typically have this anytime we go back with a remand of a zoning change. DPZ's their expertise and experience is something that we could lean on as part of this as this look at PRD and this zoning request particularly. A precedent for rezoning in this area was already set back in 2021 with some changes in residential, basically a rezoning to R3 to allow a higher density residential, which was consistent with an adjacent parcel. One of the things that council specifically asked of PC is consideration of revisions to the PRD ordinance that will accommodate this development and broaden the ordinance flexibility, going back to those kind of objectives that were outlined in the plan. And then finally, Planning Commission was also asked to consider the unintended consequences of any potential zoning change. Again, that first bullet or block kind of references that in more detail. But as you know well, any change you make has good and potentially bad that comes out of it. And this was something that the Planning Commission was asked to consider. So that leads us to kind of, I won't say it's unprecedented territory, it's unusual. Where you're going to hear conflicting recommendations from the Planning Commission as well as staff. Planning Commission had talked about this remand and this specific topic for a number of meetings, and I did provide to you as part of the agenda. Totally encourage you to review some of their previous meetings, but at their last meeting in April, they did make a recommendation to deny the request to allow R3 in the PRBD. The rationale and the concerns that were expressed during that discussion was that given the work that's underway with DPZ, that no change should be made until they have developed a full concept for this area. That's estimated at roughly 12 months. DPZ may be able to get that fast forwarded a little bit in terms of the planning element, but actual implementation of the regulations, at least 12 months, maybe significantly longer, depending on how this comes forward. Planning Commission was concerned about the possibility of spot zoning with this, and that the request may have been developer driven. I do want to acknowledge that Noreen's in the room, so if she has anything to add, certainly I don't want to preclude her from the discussion. So this was Planning Commission's recommendation. Staff had again a kind of a distinctly different recommendation that we wanted to share with you this evening and expound upon a little bit. Staff's recommendation was to amend the PRBD to allow multifamily R3 uses and incorporate revisions to the PRD, Planned Residential Development. The rationale behind that was the precedent already previously being set from R2 to R3 on the adjacent properties in question. Addition of R3 uses to PRBD is consistent with division goals, objectives, and implementation strategies outlined in the draft area plan. The request itself represents an interim change to existing zoning regulations that would build momentum towards form-based code. And at the end of the day, it would be incumbent on the developer to craft their proposal around any revisions that were made to the PRBD as well as the PRD ordinances. So while there was some developer aspect that maybe sped up the timeline, at the end of the day, any revisions that you make, it's incumbent on them to make changes to their proposal to fit within the changes being proposed here at College Township. It was asked of us to provide a little bit more information about PRBD and why we feel that that's a critical element in this discussion. So the current College Township PRD ordinance, the purpose is to increase the availability and greater variety of mixture of housing types, to encourage innovative design and residential development, more efficient use of land and public services, preserve existing topography, trees, amenities, landmarks, natural features, to relate the type, design, and layout of development to a particular site, to provide sufficient, usable, convenient, open space recreational facilities, combine and coordinate landscaping and building styles, and finally, to provide an environment of stable character and harmony with the surrounding development in accordance to the comprehensive plan. As you read between the lines with this, and you think about the Dale Summit area plan, PRD is as close as we currently have in terms of our ordinance structure to what form-based code is trying to achieve. It's trying to weave that tapestry of uses together and make it a cohesive development. PRD strives to achieve that. Does it hit the mark entirely for form-based code? No. But it's as close as we can get to that mark at this point. When staff makes the recommendation of allowing the R3 uses and PRD in the planned research and business district, this is where we're coming from, is that flexibility and trying to move the needle in terms of form-based code. Some of the general requirements under PRD. It can be established in single-family, two-family, and multifamily, so all the residential districts as well as residential office zoning district. Must contain no fewer than 15 dwelling units and be no less than 5 acres of total land area. And all land must be controlled by one landowner and developed as a single entity. We talk about the variety of uses, mixed use. These are the permitted uses. I won't go into detail with those, but there, as you can see, it kind of really changes the complexion of what you can do within that more rigidly defined district. Opens up a lot of opportunities. One of those being residential, as well as some of those other commercial and retail type uses. Another thing, as part of their contract, I emphasized early on in the presentation that we required, council as well as the RFQ required interim regulation changes. DPZ has already been tasked with making recommendations and revisions to our PRD ordinance. Kind of go through those real quickly here. DPZ has recommended an increased maximum dwelling units per acre. The rationale behind that is this considers a variety of housing types as well as number of stories that you're looking at in terms of development. They are looking at the decrease in required setback distances. This moves the building facade closer to the street. And again, starts to try to achieve that goal of more human scale development. Ensure compliance consistency with local regional planning documents. This is kind of a boilerplate topic, but ultimately what it's trying to do is ensure that the community's vision is always at the forefront of the discussion. Show placement of all building footprints. The thought process here is that it provides some insight into the future of that development. You can see it on the map, you kind of know what's coming as this development were to move forward. Location of all off-street parking. Really what the thought process there is to start moving parking behind the buildings, and it's really an improvement to aesthetics of the development. Allow non-residential buildings closer to residential buildings. This starts to get at that accessibility of use, human scale development, and weaving together those kind of rigidly defined uses that we have out there. Require common open space to be fronted by streets on at least two sides. Another recommendation from DPZ. It's another aesthetic type recommendation. One of the hearts of form-based code also gets at block standards. You think about the traditional block style development. That's something that they're suggesting as part of revisions to PRD. And then finally, very similar to something we had already talked about, requiring frontage standards. This is again trying to achieve that human scale development that was kind of highlighted as part of the Dale Summit Area Plan. With that, and a lot of detail behind that, staff is coming forward to council tonight with a couple options. Obviously, you have some conflicting recommendations, so we need your guidance. So we're providing some options. One, you can absolutely approve Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the zoning amendment request. If selected, staff is seeking future direction on how we'll address any future zoning amendment requests submitted for parcels within the Dale Summit during this interim development period. As you recall from the Planning Commission's recommendation, that 12-month was kind of thrown out there as a potential. Over the next year, if you go this route, we need some clarification from you. What do we do? You know, is it just become basically a moratorium on development? We need to know that. Second option is approval of the staff recommendation to amend PRBD district to allow multifamily, the R3 uses, and incorporate revisions to PRD. And again, this is that interim step that we've talked about it kind of ad nauseum as a part of my presentation. If selected, one of the things that we would be looking for, or at least looking to discuss with you, is the potential for remand of those PRD modifications back to Planning Commission to have that vetted out and start to tie that back to development towards a form-based code. And then ultimately, there's another option on the table if you have it. I don't know what it is, but I would certainly be willing to, we'd be willing to discuss any alternative solutions that you may have. I will stop. You've heard enough from me. There's a lot there, as I said.
All right, thank you, Mike. So staff has given us a lot to consider here. I would invite our PC rep, if she has anything to add, since staff has had their opportunity to speak. If you would like, Noreen, you can come to the podium and speak, any details around the vote and how you guys arrived at that, or anything else you want to add.
A member of the Planning Commission, and I don't have a lot to add to this other than that we were concerned with the PRD becoming actually ending up being all student housing. Because there doesn't seem to be any kind of guideline on how many can be developed really. And otherwise, it's as much as I remember. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
If you have any questions for me, I might be able to answer.
Yeah, if you could just hang out there in case anybody has any direct questions for you, you can have a seat, but we'll go ahead and we'll start out. Eric?
Sure. To Mike's last bullet, propose an alternative solution. There is a third one, and there's no timeline on a zoning request. So there's no 30-day, 90-day, whatever, no required action tonight. But aside from that, just two comments. Back to what Mike said about the north end of town. Talked to a lot of developers during the 90s when everything was exploding out there, and two themes came across. One was, as far as why are you developing out there when there's actually more affordable commercial opportunities, and the first thing was proximity to I-99 interchange, Wattle Road. Okay, we have that at Shiloh. The second thing was what Mike said, rooftops. So that's from the horse's mouth. I mean, these are the people who sit in the offices and make decisions about where they're going to build and develop. So the idea of surrounding this Dale Summit area with rooftops is valid based on everything that I heard from developers when they make decisions. They could draw circles out on Wattle Road and Colonnade and that, and from across the country, determine how many bodies lived within a certain radius of that property, and that was a huge factor in whether they developed or not. The second thing is, and last, is that being a long-time planning commission member, I totally respect where planning commission is coming from here. Again, they have a little bit narrower task or responsibility than we have, and I'm not I could have possibly come to the same conclusion. However, in my case, what is intriguing here, you guys saw my email, is the tie-in with the revisions to the PRD and how PRD can be used by both parties to do something consistent with our vision out there ahead of time. One thing I found out in my interview with the DPZ consultant, DPZ subcontractor, is that the master plan will be available, will be completed earlier rather than later in the 18-month window. The form-based code will come more towards the end of the 18-month window, but it is very conceivable that the development of the PRD, updated to the PRD, revisions to the PRD, what the developer wants to do, and the development of the master plan could all be happening simultaneously. And it could be happening with discussions from this particular developer, some of the back and forth that we have at the sketch plan level and all of that kind of stuff. So that has got me leaning towards number 2, with the condition that we incorporate the revisions, the recommended revisions to the PRD to allow the site to be developed as a PRD. Absent that, then I don't support number 2. To me,
You're
that's
talking about the DPZ recommendations, is that what you mean?
Yeah, we've asked DPZ to look at our PRD, and so even without them, just having the PRD tool at our disposal, even without those revisions, would have me looking very seriously at number 2.
Okay.
But the fact that we're going to get PRD revisions out of that exercise, that we are consistent with what we're looking for, on top of that, just kind of cinches the deal for me.
Okay, so we got a lean for number 2. Anything else there?
What's that?
Anything else?
No.
Okay, Rich?
No, I think Eric said it very well. I think I do respect how Planning Commission got to their recommendation. I do think we've been very consistent that we can't stop, just come to a stop as this process moves through and everything. And I like the fact that we've found a fairly creative yet out of in the toolbox already opportunity to marry those two processes up and everything. The concern about student housing, okay, that's one aspect of it, but I don't think it should prevent us from doing a good development in that area of the township. Oh, the only other thing, the thing I like about the PRD, it forces more planning from the developer. That, usually it's, well, I think, well, maybe, well, whatever the next guy brings in. PRD makes them say, this is what's coming in.
Yeah, and it's usually outside their comfort zone.
Yes.
Which is unusual. The developer comes forth proposing the PRD, and to me, that tells me they're willing, that's a partner I want to work with.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Anything else, Rich?
No, thanks.
Susan?
Yeah, first I want to thank Planning Commission for all the work they did on this, and also staff for doing the work and laying things out. It helps me as a new member of council to be able to really wrap my head around some of these concepts, because these are very new concepts to me. But it did occur to me that the PRD looks a lot like a pre-form-based code. So there's a lot of room in that. And I know that one of the concerns that I've had in making decisions here has been setting precedent. And that was a concern that we would be, making a decision based on a particular development request. But I think the fact that we're transitioning to the DPC plan leaves us the opportunity to make that decision without establishing a precedent. Because we're looking at this in a particular way at a particular time with some opportunities. My concern too was if we were to deny the request during this particular time, that might be off-putting to other developers who would see that this might become a closed window while we're trying to transition to a new way of doing things out there. I think you made a really good point, Mike, and I think you highlighted it with your discussions about developers in the 90s. I lived out in Independence Place for 5 years, and I would have loved to have had more retail places to get to. I couldn't even walk to Walmart because we didn't have sidewalks. So in keeping with the idea of a form-based code and building communities that will accommodate that kind of lifestyle, I really like the opportunity to go with what staff is recommending. I think that's very important. And I noticed that the developer's plan is multi-use, but that wasn't clear to me. And in the form-based code and in PRD, there are multiple uses. So there's the residential use, of course, but also the idea of would this particular development include a retail space? It seems very small for that, but what would be the other pieces of multi-use out there? Would that be offices? Have we any idea?
Yeah, I think you had that one slide, right, that showed it.
We were actually approached when we had the initial conversation with the developer. They had represented to us that they were interested in market rate rental housing, not student housing, but market rate rental housing, along with some degree of commercial activity. And I hesitate to call it a lifestyle type center,
Right.
but more in keeping with some of that type of more contemporary development that is occurring. Some of the larger municipalities, some of the larger communities both in Pennsylvania and around the country have this mix of both residential and retail relatively close by. And that, I believe, was the vision that was being conveyed to us at staff during that preliminary conversation by the developer.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that in Western Pennsylvania, the PRD.
Right, yeah.
And so I looked at some of that, and that was very appealing. The other piece of it is, it's an interesting piece of property. It's really at that interchange on 99, and that would be one of the first properties people would see coming into our township. And that's the idea of the Dale Summit plan, is that we would create that sort of gateway to College Township. And right now, that's not a very appealing gateway. So
The left side.
it seems like it's almost, it could be, it has elements that could be considered almost a development, not a development, but a demonstration plan for us to learn more on and work. And it sounds like the developer is very open to that. The other piece I just wanted to be clear on, the other change in zoning from R2 to R3 was on zoning that allowed for a change in residential zoning, and this isn't that same thing. The PR, I have to look at my acronyms again. The PRBD doesn't allow for that, but I certainly would be comfortable because we would be doing it through the PRD. And R3 would be a pretty dense area, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a long story way of saying that I'm leaning towards 2 as well.
Good. Yeah, so I guess it's a privilege to sit in this chair because you get to hear all the great stuff everybody says. Yeah, so I mean, I'm in agreement with everyone. I'm leaning towards 2, and especially I had the same thing written down, what Eric said, with the caveat as we go ahead and, make the changes to the PRD, that we do incorporate what DPZ had written out there. Because I really do think that gets us the form-based code. And I think that allows us to do it better than the north side of town, right? If you consider, yeah, they built it up there because there was housing close, but it was existing housing. They didn't build housing integrated right? Which is what we're trying to achieve with the form-based code. You know, that you could essentially be living right above a restaurant that you like to go to every evening, right? Or have drinks at, or whatever it might be, right? That whole town center idea. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in support of it, and I do appreciate, you know, Planning Commission's perspective on this and coming at it like that. And, you know, my first initial look at it, I was like, nope, we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait for DPZ to get done, but I do appreciate the comment too, saying, well, you know, we can't just stop business in College Township. People want to live here too, right? And that provides housing for people. So that's my comment. So we need an action on this. So I think are we sensing a motion to accept staff's recommendation and instruct then the drafting of the new ordinance?
I think this is actually going to be a two-motion situation. I think the first motion, and again, staff's apologies, we needed to get through this. We probably should have had a more accurate action plan in place and written down for you. But my recommendation to council would be, based on the sentiment that I've heard expressed around the table, would be to move forward with incorporating the PRD into the Planned Research Business Park District. That would be a motion, along with setting a public hearing sometime at the appropriate time, which is at least 45 days, probably sometime in September, probably we could say the first or second meeting of September. That would be one motion. That would be the what we'll call the rezoning motion. That would be adding that use, the PRBD use, to the Planned Research Business Park District. That's one motion. The second motion that should be made immediately thereafter would be remand the proposed PRD changes to Planning Commission for their review and comment and report to council at their earliest convenience.
Because that would be the PRD that we would be
That's
allowing. The revised PRD is what we would be allowing in the PRD.
And my question to you, Mike, it's a little unfair to ask you, but you don't see any problem with that sequencing?
No, I think that's fair. I mean, the first question ultimately was, and that's kind of where we got to this, and that's where the memo stopped intentionally, is we don't want to presuppose that you had a specific opinion here. So I think in terms of sequencing, you're spot on. The way it reads right now is multifamily, the R3, that opens the ability for the PRD. I believe that's sequentially how it works.
I'm sorry, that's correct. Yes.
So it would be incorporating R3 as allowable use within PRBD, which triggers the opportunity for you to use a PRD.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, and you're spot on. But then the second part would be, as part of that, a remand letter going to Planning Commission, looking at those revisions as proposed by DPZ to move our PRD section of the ordinance even closer to form-based code. And some of the things that they may want to consider, just putting this out there as part of the remand that you may eventually see, based on where I think we're headed. One of those things is this specific to just Dale Summit? So that's one of those unintended consequences. If you do a change to PRD as it's written, how does that impact other residential areas that may want to develop a PRD? So that's something that Planning Commission is going to have to look at closely. It may become basically a Dale Summit specific PRD as well as a standard PRD that fits in other zoning districts. That's very technical work, stuff that will ultimately come back to you for your consideration, but just kind of putting that out there. But in terms of your sequencing, Adam, I think you're spot on.
All right, on that note, who wants to give it a shot?
Well, if I could.
Yeah.
So are we going to ask staff to develop the mechanism to add multifamily R3 to the PRBD? Is that what we're asking? We're not actually saying do that.
Well, no, I think you would actually be saying do it tonight.
to potentially complicate this further, is R3 one of the zoning districts we share with Patton?
No.
What's one of the Rs?
We provide them with
Industrial,
and they provide us with, I believe, R2 and/or R3.
okay.
So
it doesn't
we're
complicate.
adding more, we're just adding more to what we, at one point, were,
Borrowing from them.
yes.
Correct.
So in theory, maybe this is overly optimistic, we're rebalancing, we're adding a zoning district that we don't currently have enough of, to the extent that we're borrowing some,
At the moment.
just trying to build the rationale here.
Yes.
And I have a question about the R3. Is there something that needs to be called out that would better define R3 as not student housing, as somehow housing that, because that was one of the concerns that Planning Commission had, that this might open up the potential for more student housing?
Yeah, and I know as part of their presentation at the last meeting, some of the questions, staff did provide DPZ with some questions that Planning Commission had from their previous discussions to answer. One of them was specific to student housing, and Marina had some specific strategies already in mind to basically address that concern as part of this type of an update.
Okay, so the first motion would be to simply set the public hearing for the change to add R3
To the planned research business
to
park.
PRDB, and that would then go forward. In the
Right.
background, we would be remanding to Planning Commission some potential revisions to PRD.
Suggested revisions, right. That's correct.
But the public hearing would only be for the simple change, add one single allowed use to PRDB, which is R3.
Correct.
Okay, is that what?
Well, I guess that was kind of where I was going. Usually when we set a public hearing, we have a specific document that we're setting, so we're changing our ordinance.
Yeah.
We would need to see what
that's true.
that changes to that ordinance look like, so that we could send that to
And
public
the
hearing.
impact of adding R3 to other PRD,
That,
Or PRD to, yeah.
PRDB.
Yeah.
excellent point. That's something that we can accomplish. We can have that back in front of council at our next meeting.
Yeah.
The actual document and wording of that document that would incorporate R3 into PRBD, so that we could then move forward with setting, or making that motion to amend and incorporating the necessary advertising.
So in that case, we do not need a motion. We can
That's
just
correct.
instruct staff to go ahead and make those changes to the ordinance and bring it back to us.
Just direction,
Right.
Just direction.
But we do still want to remand the PRD.
If those can move simultaneously,
Yeah.
which
And
I think they
that
could.
they can. I don't think that there's any problem with that. We already have in our possession suggested changes that came from DPZ to, if you will, enhance our existing PRD. And I see no reason that council cannot remand that document. Now, you have not seen the entirety of that document, is that correct, Mike? You've had a presentation here. So the question for council then becomes, prior to a remand, does council want to review the suggested DPZ modifications to the PRD?
We got yes, no?
No, only because in this case, we asked them to make them as we are looking at this particular site and form-based code, right? It's an update. It's an update we would have anyways.
Okay.
So normally we would say yes, right? Because this would be happening in-house.
True.
Our planner or somebody would be it would be coming up, but we've already directed them to do this, right?
They have completed that.
Yeah.
For
They being DP.
DPC, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So in theory, we've already asked them, so the only thing that's missing is the cursory review of what we would be remanding.
I'm
What's that?
I'm comfortable.
Yeah, I
You're
am too.
comfortable just sending it on, remanding?
Yeah.
Comfortable just remanding?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
All right, so I mean, do we have a motion, somebody willing to make it? Or remand to PC?
Move to remand,
Yep,
said
Second.
revisions.
Second.
okay. We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Can I ask one question
No
outside of
opposed.
this? It's a detail question. Where else outside of Dale Summit do we have PRBD zones?
That would be Innovation Park.
Okay, okay,
And
That's
staff
it.
felt if they chose to put residential, that seems to go with
right.
the trend of the world now. Is work where you live
Right,
where you work.
Exactly. Okay,
Excellent.
trying to get the picture.
Does anybody have an objection to a quick recess?
No.
Not at all.
Never.
Do we have to come back?
We'll recess for 10 minutes.
That's one.
Meeting back to order. All right, we are on OB2, residential rental ordinance review, discussion and action. Mark.
Okay, real short and sweet. You have the memo, which pretty much outlines everything. The last meeting, council discussed the remanding this to Planning Commission for review, and council made the decision that they wanted to, that you wanted to solidify the intent section of the ordinance prior to the remanding. So this is what we're here for today. Staff would ask that council discuss some of the bullet points that are currently in the intent. If you see on the second page of the memo, it has some potential proposed things to add to the intent. And ask that council start the work on this so we can get the intent put together. And also, when you come to time to remand, offer any other suggestions of any particular parts of the existing ordinance you would maybe like special attention placed.
Okay, so just to jog our memories, right, just asking us to get the intent down so that we can then remand the ordinance. Yeah, okay, gotcha, or the code. All right, everybody clear what's the ask is? Rich, we'll start out with you.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable with what we're proposing as the intent. I'm confirming that the other intent, if there's things that staff has identified needing, that we could firm up in the ordinance, that would be part of this discussion.
Of a remand, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know that at the last conversation that council had about this, we spent a considerable amount of time on intent.
Right.
Initially, what we had anticipated doing was maybe not spending as much time as we ended up on intent, but to review some of the issues that we've encountered with the administration of the ordinance as is presently written since its application. And so that would be another objective here prior to a remand. So while you don't have those items in front of you this evening, to the extent that you may be able to identify any of those tonight, that's great. But this may have to come back to you.
This is what staff has identified as needing work on. I would hope that staff could work with Planning Commission
Right.
to come up with the solutions for those. I don't want to.
And again, we wanted to afford council the opportunity.
Yeah, I think the intent is ours. We need to make sure that reflects our intent for the ordinance. So, and I'm comfortable with the beefed up intent. I don't have any specific thing to take away or add to it. I just want to, in my mind, be clear that that's part of what we're going to ask Planning Commission to look at.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nothing for me.
Susan?
The only question, I think Rich, you said it. On the proposed intent, I was just a little confused. It says to ensure long-term rentals are offered for rent in increments of 14 consecutive nights or less. Is that less or more? That's more, right?
Yeah, it should be more than 14.
Okay.
Because our short term
Yeah.
is, we allow up to 14 days of
Yeah,
short
so
term.
this should be
Got it.
in
Just a
increments
typo,
of 15 nights or more.
Yeah.
The next one says
Right.
or less.
Right,
Correctly
so it was
says
the
or
comparison
less.
between the two, it didn't, they were the same. Okay. No, I agree, I think the proposed intent, it reflects what I've understood so far, so.
Eric?
Is there the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 items under proposed intent? To me, based on what we've been talking about forever on this, those don't all carry the same weight. What I would offer is that the third one I'm sorry, the second one, to preserve the character of single-family neighborhoods, and first part of the second one, to preserve the character of single-family neighborhoods, that was the initial driving factor behind this. That was the thing that caught our attention and got us moving. All these other things then came in as we went. So to the extent that that can be the headline of the proposed intent, I'd rather see that, because our response to people was all through this, we have a responsibility to protect the integrity of the neighborhoods. Okay, first and foremost. And then all of these other things came along as, while we're doing this, we're going to do this. But that was the driving force. So to the extent that that can be the lead for this, and I don't know how you do it, I don't know if those were going to be bullets or a paragraph. If it's a
I think they
paragraph,
can be numbered even.
I would agree with you on that.
mean,
That was
you
my
were-
recollection when this was put together with the, that was the key, as well as preserving the attainable housing stock. I know that, recall, that was a big point. We don't want investors buying our houses and turn them into rentals. We want residents to live in there, be them as a long-term
Yeah,
renter.
and that
or
was, consistently in every conversation, I can recall, that was, the very thing that was brought up time and time again, right, as put forward was, this is in order to
Right.
do
And when
that,
somebody
yeah.
approaches me with a comment, complaint, whatever, that's my answer. It's not all these other things. It's that. The exercise the Bellefonte Borough Council went through when they did something similar, they kept pointing out that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court there's case law now that defines a short-term rental in a residential neighborhood as a hotel. Do we want to allow hotels in single-family neighborhoods? No. Short-term rental, not long-term, but something that you rent out to different people every weekend basically is the equivalent of a hotel. So that should be the lead. However we format it, I'd like to see that emphasized.
Should we prioritize the rest of them, or?
To me, it was most important to get those two out. I would agree with any other order the rest of them go in. Some of them could actually be subcategories under other ones, or included in the same, like we did with the COG goals. I don't have any specific thoughts on that beyond
The number one.
Beyond that being the lead.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, overall, the intent speaks well, but I would put that one right up front, agree with what Eric's saying there. I don't know if it's worth like maybe a preamble, and then prioritizing, does that make sense?
With that being part of the preamble, that being the lead.
I think there's a way that it can be crafted, it would read something, and I'm just off the cuff here, to preserve the character of single-family neighborhoods and attainable housing stock through regulation of two types of, and then you'd have some which would tie in these other points. Kind of just flows almost like paragraph form.
Throw a couple whereases in there.
I like it.
A couple,
Yeah, and so that would go right in our remand letter, right?
I'm thinking simpler is better.
yes.
Susan, Rich, thoughts on what Eric has said additionally?
No,
I agree.
I agree.
I think it's well said, and I think he's right, that says the intent.
It's sometimes
Yeah.
the discussion ends right after that one.
Yeah, and everything else is how you operationalize the intent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see that, as you say that, I see that.
Yeah, very well.
Are there any of these bullet points that anyone think should be removed or would not be necessary, or?
No.
So we'll get some direction, so I guess council would like to have staff put this in a little more order and present it.
And then move forward with staff's identified issues, challenges, et cetera, in the conversation with PC.
And then remand letter, right?
Yep.
Yeah, like the sixth and seventh one could be kind of combined. They're kind of covering the same ground, two slightly different, stuff like that. to ensure long-term rentals, to ensure short-term rentals, you know, those could be subcategories of even the last bullet.
Yeah, I think we understand. I think the clear priority is preservation of neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so I think everything else kind of flows from that. So I think we have enough that we'll be able to construct a meaningful remand letter and carry forward with the process.
Okay, so you need anything else from us?
Other than a motion to remand to Planning Commission, the short-term rental ordinance.
I make a motion.
Or are we there yet? That's what, I want to understand, because I'm not sure, I'm not
Yeah.
seeing Mark's understanding. on
Yeah, are
his
you
face.
ready to remand this now, or do you want to see the finished product of the intent before you?
I'm okay not seeing it. Again, you've got the gist.
Yeah, I think you got the gist.
Typically, we will send you the remand letter in
Yeah.
advance anyway for kind of
Sure.
the collective
Final
head nod.
comment,
I think
yeah.
that
Yeah.
achieves the intent.
We good, I see head nods, yeah, so, okay, a motion, I'll hear a
Need
motion.
a second?
Motion for a remand letter. Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay. We have a motion to remand. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. No opposed. Okay, moving on to OB3. Well, we got through that one quick. Must have been that break we took.
That's it.
That's right.
All right, well,
Rejuvenated everybody.
That's all right. Mike will bring us back.
yeah.
Mike's gonna, bring us back.
I'm
in.
the barnacle on the flow of this meeting, so, yeah, give me 1 second here and I will get this pulled up. No big presentation.
Where's the terrain model? Come on.
This is just obviously continuation of your earlier discussion. One of the things that I, will reference, and it was a point that was brought up during the earlier discussion on the rezoning. This does not have a shot clock associated with it at this time. We're obviously working through a process. At the last meeting, you had kind of that broad overview discussion, took some time with the narrative. Staff is working on going back through that ordinance and incorporating your comments. At some point, the full package will come back to you for a more detailed review. So the intent tonight was to start walking into the discussion of the mapping, specifically recommendations on any of the proposed facilities as depicted in the map that was provided, any recommendations for facilities that were not depicted on the map. One of the things that we had done offline was staff did send you a mapping application, very consistent with what we did with the pedestrian facilities master plan, for really two reasons. One, to aid in your ability to kind of go in and see and manipulate the proposed facilities that show up in this map that I have up on the screen at the moment. And two, much like the last time, to use you as beta testers for what we intend on using as one component of the public review period, that being the online map where residents can go in and add features that they would like to see included on the official map, very similar to what we did, again, with the pedestrian facilities master plan. As part of this discussion, as it continues to roll forward, once council's comfortable and provided their thoughts and recommendations on the mapping, we will ultimately be bringing back to you that full package, the narrative, the ordinance narrative, along with the map as discussed and revised by council. And at that point, there will be some requested actions of setting the public hearing and opening up the public comment period. But at this point, we're still in that process, still in that discussion of mapping. So I will stop there, and Dustin, at chair's discretion, however you feel appropriate, we'll kind of walking through, and certainly, if you want to assign a time frame to this discussion, whatever you want to do. But that's kind of what we had in mind was, okay, you have a list of features as provided forward through the process to this point. let's have a discussion about them, see which ones you believe belong in there, which ones you don't think belong in there.
Okay.
And then I did be remiss if I didn't mention, as you alluded to during discussion of consent, there were 2 items in our consent agenda, one from Mr. Pauly and one from Mr. Schulte, referenced specific items that show up in official maps. So have those as basically addendum to this topic.
All right, so quick question. This map has, it's the same draft we saw last time, right?
This one hasn't changed. I know in talking with our GIS coordinator that there were a few features that were thrown in so far by council through the mapping application. They're not referenced here. I can note those as we walk through the discussion, but there were 3 particular features that were highlighted at this point that I can basically add to the back end of that spreadsheet.
Okay, yeah, so let's cover that after we give, if Mr. Pauly would, I see he's in the room, if he would like to speak, if you want to speak, Mr. Pauly, you can come up to the podium at this point. If not, you can, we do have your correspondence.
Yeah, my name's Wayne Pauly. I live on Mount Ninny Road in Lamont. And as you know, I gave you a pretty detailed letter so I wouldn't miss any points that I wanted to make. On the map, there are 3 parcels that my family owns that are called out as land to be reserved by the map. 2 of them are lots along Mount Nittany Road, and one of them is a lot in Nittany Orchards. And I'll start briefly with the 2 lots on Mount Nittany Road. Interestingly, we have the township engineer here. I may ask for an opinion as well. Those lots are very difficult lots. They have wetland components. There's a stream that flows through there. They are called out as buildable with a single-family home. I'm an engineer, I'm a professional engineer, a Pennsylvania engineer. So I've looked at them very detailed. They are challenging to build on those lots. Okay, but they are called out that you could build on them, and I think if it was done carefully, it could be done. Surprise, you can imagine my surprise when I got the Parks Commission's plan that they would put Mount Nittany parking on those lots. That environmentally, that would be next to impossible. I mean, you would very carefully, you could put a home with proper, maybe and with very little landscaping, proper drainage, very carefully you could put a home on there. You wouldn't want a big grassy yard, but you certainly would not want to gravel over and clear and park on those lots. So that's my opinion. I have a personal bias, obviously. I bought them because they're across the street from my house. I like them the way they are. But I would like to see them eventually built very carefully with a house. I don't envision them always being empty. I think they could be built carefully with a house. They'd be a beautiful place to live if it was done right. Parks Commission called them out as parking, and that's impossible. When you do a Google Earth view of Mount Nittany, that might seem possible, but if you walk them, it's impossible. So I would see that idea dying a sudden death tonight if any reason prevails. Okay, over in Nittany Orchards. The end of
There should be a pointer there, Wayne.
There should also be a number too corresponding to it, right?
They're all 39.
39.
They're all
It's
reserved.
hard to see. They're all 39.
All reserved to see.
So at the end of Mount Nittany, on the end of the Conservancy lands there, Lion's Paw lands, we have a 14-acre parcel. I met up with Mr. Schenk back in '93 when I moved up to Mount Nittany, and we stood there with him at his garden, and we looked up at that, and he said, well, I talked with Lion's Paw, and they're just going down to the 1,300-foot contour, so he offered it to them. And they didn't want it at the time. And so he and I struck up a deal for a purchase agreement. I didn't have the money. And he gave me a long-term agreement. It turns out that was an error in my letter. We bought the land from him in '99. So we have owned that land for 24 years. It's outside of the conservancy. It's in a residential area. There's houses all around it. If a person wants to hike up through there, you get up to a very steep end of Mount Nittany. It's about a foot up for every 2 feet across. You rise about a foot if you go 2 feet. That end of Mount Nittany is extremely steep. So people that hike up there don't really want to hike up the end of Mount Nittany. They really want to walk across West Mount Nittany Road to get over to the trail. But we've never stopped them from doing that. It's not posted, but if they get up there, then they get over to the Williams property, and they will find that they don't get a receptive pass on through to the trailhead, because that's right in their yard. I don't see that as a park. I mean, as a park, Nittany Orchards was developed, parkland was set aside, that's Nittany Orchards Park. So the parkland dedication was done for that region in Nittany Orchards. This was a lot in Nittany Orchards that resulted after the development of Nittany Orchards. It's lot 113. So there again, I bought a building lot in a planned, approved residential lot plan. It wasn't desired by the Conservancy because it's below the 1,300-foot contour. If you look at any of their brochures today, back in '99 when I bought it, they've been consistent all the way to today. The Conservancy wants the land down to 1,300 feet. The boundary line of that property is 1,300 feet, and they turned it down when they talked with Warren Schenk back when he developed Nittany Orchards. And we bought it, we've owned it for 24 years. We would like to keep it, and I don't see where it makes sense that it should now become part of Lion's Paw. I did point out in my letter, people don't understand Lion's Paw. Lion's Paw is a wonderful organization, but they are a private organization. Okay, they are an alumni group that does this wonderful service of providing all of this open space to us, but they are a private organization, and I'm going to mention this in the case of, and I know he's not here today, Ralph Muma owns this parcel right there, and he's a very active member of Lion's Paw, and I know he's talked over the years with Lion's Paw about his parcel. And that's probably an ongoing conversation as he plans what he's going to do with his. And I guess I'd rather not sell mine to Lion's Paw. My children, we've talked about it. But we're outside of their boundary anyway from what they're requesting. So my request is that we not be considered for this process. If Lion's Paw weren't there, if that were Farmer Jones's field and you were looking for parkland, you would not be looking at our parcel. The only reason you're looking at that parcel is because it's bordering on Lion's Paw, and Lion's Paw has Mount Nittany Conservancy has a very clear, if you look at any of their brochures, they have a very clear line, and we are outside of their line. And so I I've sat here in these meetings, we've made rules about beekeeping, cow keeping, horse keeping. For all 30 years, I've sat in this room and we've set the 1,300-foot line as a line in the sand, and we are outside of that line, okay? So I believe that we should be able to keep our property private as we do now. It's in, by the way, it is in the Clean and Green program, so that severely limits what we can do with it. It's basically a house, but it's already pretty much conserved. Anyway, that's more than, I thought I just read the letter, but now I'm.
Thank you, Wayne. Before you, does anybody have any questions for Wayne, anything for clarification? And just to summarize, right, so your request is that you remove your properties from the land reservation?
I would request that the 2 lots on Mountain Indian Road and the number, this one.
Yep.
The 1,300-foot contour, by the way, right?
Yeah. Those sections of 39 be removed from land reservation.
That is my request.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, Mike, you had indicated that there were some changes that were put online. Did you want to show that?
Let me see if I have that readily available here. Hold on one second.
Just trying to get all the information.
Sure, no, that's a good approach. Give me 1 second, I'll find that.
I could add to his tongue-in-cheek that it's tough on those 2 lots because there's some unruly neighbors there too. Just full disclosure, my property borders Wayne's 2 lots there on Mount Nittany Road.
All right, yeah, so you referenced that there was a couple thrown in there from council so far, and I'll just reference those. So they're kind of highlighted in this bright pink. And this is just extension of the existing path. Drive Obis to Gerald was shown. This one doesn't really follow the contour, but the intent is there. A path down over Gerald to connect to this priority corridor that was identified in the PED master plan. And I think, probably some of the intent is to get up to the food bank and into the neighborhood itself.
Is that a widening of the sidewalk that's there?
I think the way it was shown is, let me just see. It just says a connection, so I think it's just showing the line of making some accommodation for PED bike in that section.
Okay, so bike more than PED, because there's already a PED connection there.
That's my line.
What's that?
That's my line.
Oh.
So yes, exactly. So I saw that the existing path was stopped halfway down Gerald, and we had talked about that with the food bank.
Yeah, so I think this is a good opportunity. We can just start out with you on requested changes and modifications. Okay, and that was the only ones, right?
There's one more.
Okay,
one more.
sorry.
I apologize. Let me find it here. Sorry,
Well, who would put the other one on? Do we know?
That I don't know. No names associated with them. I believe it was this one. No, that's not it. Hold on, I'll find it.
Okay, well,
there it is.
Go ahead, Susan. Just go ahead.
Yeah, that was me as well.
Okay, so Susan
Yeah,
did.
that was it.
Susan Strong.
It's all Susan.
Early morning. I mean, my reasoning there was looking through what had been placed as various paths, multi-use bike paths, sidewalks. It was really to connect what looked disconnected to my eye when I looked at the map and went through all of the elements. And it was really more trying to envision as a biker, as a walker, in particular on Gerald Street going up and down from the food bank. How could we designate a place that would be safe? And I used to ride out on Trout Road, so I wasn't clear on why that particular part of Trout Road or Drabelbis, Drabelbis. I know that place, that line, and it wasn't clear to me why that wasn't set aside as a place of interest. So
Okay.
there might be some engineering reason why it wasn't. So
Anything else on the map to add?
I don't really think so, no.
other than your additions?
No, and I guess I was interested to hear what Mr. Pauly said, and I hadn't been to see the properties as he described them. I didn't understand the history, so I appreciated all the detail. That helps me as a new member of council. I'd like to go on with discussion around the features of his property that might make it not usable in the way it's being reserved.
Okay. Anything else? Eric?
First of all, I agree with both of Susan's suggestions. Mike, I spent a lot of time, most of my time, in the input module and the comment viewer. So I don't know if you wanted to have a separate discussion with that instead of inserting it into this.
I think
at the
it's,
end.
I think that's an important, maybe a secondary discussion to, however deep you want to get into these, but that's something we'd certainly do want your comments on as well. If there's things as you as beta testers of that app recognized and had issues with, things you liked, things you didn't, I certainly am interested in those. Anything we can make better.
This was comments on the system itself.
Right.
Because, and I should explain, I was trying to use that to look at the official map and see if I had comments on it. So at the same time, I was test driving the input module while I was trying to see if I had things to add to the map, and that raised a number of questions. In particular, and this would be relevant, does the comment viewer, has all those layers. Is the existing official map represented in the comment viewer along with the proposed changes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
Well, but see, that was critical because I was using it as the tool to evaluate the proposed map. I thought that would be an easier way than going through a separate document, trying to look at it in the context of all the other layers that were on there. And that was the first question I had.
Yeah, I'd have to get clarification from
If not,
Shane.
then a suggestion would be that if we're going to ask people to use the input module, it ought to be real clear what's already on the official map and what we're proposing.
Okay.
So that would be a generic comment because I assume we're going to get back to this in another meeting.
It's an overlay type of thing, right?
What's that?
An overlay type of thing is what you're
Well,
saying.
it's just some distinction, because I couldn't tell between what was on there, what was existing and what was being proposed.
Yeah. And it doesn't give you, I wasn't able to get into it, but does it give you the ability to like toggle
Oh, yeah.
away?
It does.
Propose.
Yeah, I think there's a way, and this is just how Shane builds the layers. He could build a layer of, adopted official map and propose that you could toggle on and off.
What I suspect is there are elements, he has it like parks and this and that. I suspect there's elements from all of those that are already on the official map.
Right.
Right.
And then there's elements from all of those that are in the proposed official map. So if we're just asking people from a blank slate, then that's probably fine. But if we're asking for specific comments on what we're proposing to change, then maybe there ought to be some way to know what's
currently there and
on it and what we're suggesting to change.
Yeah, no, I like that, Eric, and I think absolutely that can be done.
And while we're on the subject, and then you can pass me for the rest of this discussion. As you're going down through to toggle the layers, the little tiny dots that you have to put your cursor on to toggle them on or off, you can't even tell if it's toggled on or off because the dots are so small. And it would be helpful to me, because I'm a visual person, if the layer where you're toggling the layers on and off, if they were color-coded to match the lines and things on the map.
Gotcha.
Because you may know what you want to toggle off looking at the map, but you may not know what it's called, or vice versa.
Right. So
all the things that you toggle are just black and white, but all the layers are different colors. It would.
You're referencing that aspect of it? I'm just, so I can clarify.
Yeah.
So where you can go in and shut layers off, turn layers on.
Yeah, is that the comment viewer? Or
This is,
that the
I'm sorry, this is the input app.
Yes.
I gotcha.
At least on my PC, see those little dots, right, those little blue dots?
Mm-hmm.
Only the circle fills in. If you toggle it on or off,
Okay.
that little white circle in the middle turns blue or black, and it's really hard to tell which ones you have
All right.
toggled on or off.
Yeah, I'll see what options Shane has there.
More
in that
deliberate.
tool.
Yeah, my old eyes couldn't tell if that layer was, and these are constructive
Yeah, absolutely.
ideas if we're gonna get input.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff from a beta tester I'm absolutely looking for. At the end of the day, when we roll this out to the public, we want it to be as user-friendly as possible. And I'm envisioning, quite frankly, doing a similar process to what we did with PED Master Plan. You have this as one means, and then you also have the traditional hard copy map, some kind of station set up here at the township that folks can come in and draw on the map as well. So, but yeah, I appreciate that. That's what I'm
One
looking
more
for.
suggestion, then, if you can go back to the input module.
Yep.
If you click up there, I think the very farthest icon on the left, up in the right corner, where you can actually type stuff in. Okay, yeah, you're almost there. Yes, when you, if you create something.
Yep. Sorry.
And then it will open up the box.
Let me get this out of the way here.
Like
So you're
just click on one of those things and put it on the map. Okay, then just put your cursor on the map.
Yep.
And then it should open up a box to allow, okay. See that field in the middle where you're gonna type your comment? It needs to be bigger.
Okay.
Because if you have a 3-line comment, the only way to read the comment is to scroll to the end. I think there's a way, there's plenty of room for that box to be
To make
bigger.
the comment box bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because most people's comments aren't gonna fit entirely in that box, and the box doesn't expand as you talk.
Okay.
Little things, but if
Yeah.
we're gonna depend on this as a tool, and I certainly am gonna use it.
Yeah. No, good stuff.
That's it, Dustin.
Anything on content that you wanted to highlight tonight?
Not necessarily, because I like everything that's on there. There's some things that I'm not so sure why they're on there, but I don't think tonight is, I think we're talking a real big picture right now, so no.
Okay, so tonight is not the night to say, I don't like this, I'm not sure
Well,
what.
it could be, I'm just saying I don't have that.
Okay, you don't have that right now.
I think that's entirely appropriate, and certainly, like I said at the beginning, no shot clock attached to this. We can carry this discussion over a couple meetings, because I know there's a lot there.
Okay, yeah, so you just don't, yeah, you're just not, yeah, you don't have that for now.
I had trouble, I wanted to use this, and I ran into some roadblocks, so I didn't get the full picture of what was in
Right.
there because of the,
You're not exactly there yet.
yes.
Rich?
I'm glad you said that. Because I know I wasn't.
Only because I tried to use this and I ran into those things, but.
Yeah, I tried to use both, but there's a lot. There's just a lot. And we had a couple other things going on today too. The one question I would have, we went through Mountain Indy Medical's tower and everything like that. It got said multiple times about some kind of connection between the medical center and Orchard Road. Is that something that we could potentially have here or consider?
So it's not on here?
No.
It's your official
Not
map.
yet,
That's right.
No.
Not on here.
not yet.
Yeah, the only addition that was made was that short connection to finish basically the sidewalk out to Park, but
Right.
no, anything going down Orchard, I do not believe shows
No,
up.
there's,
No.
Well, there's what's the green line?
to Park Avenue?
Orchard Road has a green line.
Yeah, that's
I think the green line's an existing
the
bike
existing,
path.
yeah.
The
Because you got
existing bike path.
The existing, yeah.
the bike highway from
Right.
Puddintown to Orchard.
Yeah. And that little bit of Mount Nittany's sidewalk would connect to Park Ave, so that would create that continuous, but it wouldn't go, I mean, you're talking about a shortcut up Orchard, it would be, I didn't do that because it's such a steep pitch. and that would be a tough ride up, but a walking path or something like that, I hadn't thought about that, I was thinking bike.
I was
It's a good
thinking
idea.
more
It's a good
walking,
idea.
but I don't, is that what we're trying to do today? I mean, I just throw that out.
I mean,
I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I
I
think
think any, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of like I mean, what I'm sensing is if you have a thought, put it out there, right?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, at this point, I think the gambit is available to you. So anything that you don't like and you want to talk about it and possibly remove it, you can talk about it.
Sure.
Anything that you see that you think is a good idea, add it, we'll get it on there so we can look at it.
Yeah.
Because
Mr.
we're not
Paul,
finalizing any of this tonight.
right. So Mr. Pauly gave us a lot to think about.
Right.
Mr. Schulte gave us a lot to think about. I'm trying to think, you know, like, as we've gone through these various plans and this and that and the other thing, what was the other one that I was from, the new section of Stearns? I forget what that section is called, towards commercial boulevard.
Winfield Heights. Oh, Winfield Heights?
Yes,
right?
Winfield Heights to Commercial Boulevard, that was something that we talked about at one point, but I don't know if we have that opportunity, but we're just, 10 years worth of, remembering all the, boy, I wish we had, I
Well,
wish
the
could.
last, just keep in mind, the last major overhaul of the College Township official map occurred in 2008. That was the last major overhaul. There were modest modifications that were made since that time. But the base map that you're working with is a 2008 map primarily.
Gotcha. No,
So
there's
there's a lot.
actually I don't know what color I would call that,
Yeah, it's the kind of.
but it's
pink.
there, it's there.
It was, that one was one of those that I can reference. It
Yep.
does come directly from a plan. That was one of our secondary
Yep.
investment corridors. So.
But I think we've caught a lot of stuff over the years. And then the pedestrian master plan is the key to taking this to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously was the kind of genesis of this discussion, is how do you get those corridors that were identified in that plan embedded here? And then obviously as the process went out, everybody kind of does the same thing. This thing expands significantly, and now we're having that discussion of, did it expand far enough, or does it need kind of pulled back in? And we're going to have that same discussion once it goes out to the public. There's going to be this expansive number of comments. I don't imagine it'll be as much as we got in Ped Master Plan, but you could see a significant number.
We had a
and
room
it's gonna
full
be-
in 2008.
It's going to be on you to kind of bring that back.
Right.
Anything further, Rich?
Nothing.
I guess my comments are somewhat similar to what I made comments on the last time we talked about. I did not get a chance to get in and play around with the tool. I will, though. I'm familiar with GIS, so I understand how it works, but I'll get in there and play with it a little bit more. I guess one thing that I'll start out with saying is, which I think Eric had brought up last time, understanding the motivations for why Parks and Rec chose to do this with this property, right? And why PC's, and we had a lot of that from PC, I think, when it came back to us. But also in learning, from what Mr. Pauly had shared, that Parks and Rec was thinking about, 2 of his lots for parking. It just doesn't seem fitting to me, and it's very intriguing to me that Parks and Rec would do that. Say cut trees down and let's pave it and put a parking lot. But that doesn't seem fitting to me, since and here's the other thing, right? We're taking steps to improve the parking situation up there anyway, with land that the township already has. So with that, I would support, just broadly, any of these land reservations where the property owner, speaks up and says, hey, I don't want to be part of this. I would support, us taking away that reservation on the map. And that can be done, now until through the public comment, part. And then, I tell you what, 38, I think that's the stuff that's overlaid on the stream. I mean, I love that idea, but I'm not sure it's fitting on a map like that, because I think we're just trying to get access, right? We're not trying to reserve it, right? We can't reserve the stream. So, I mean, I love that idea. I think we should have it as maybe a goal, you know, to start talking to the quarry and stuff like that, to maybe, you know, some kind of, you know, agreement to where we can get some public access, whatever it might be, but I'm not sure that's fitting. And that's really my major comments, and I'll get on and, you know, any other specific ones, but yeah, that's my major comments. Anything else from anybody? Do you have what you need, Mike? What's the next steps?
I want to go back to
ahead.
what you said, what I said last meeting. I think at some point, we have to hear, whether it's a memo, summary,
Yeah.
on some of maybe the more, the ones we maybe anticipate to be controversial or are going to draw attention, the rationale from PC or Park and Rec.
Yeah.
Like Mr. Pauly's would be the perfect example. You know, we haven't.
Well, you have to see the
we
two
haven't heard
sides.
Park and Rec's
Yeah.
rationale for why, so it's hard
Planning
for me to say.
Commission on 15, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm listening to him, and I'm saying, well, we shouldn't be on there.
Yeah.
And I may end up that way, but in fairness, we should hear from Park and Rec as to why.
I will put out.
And
that-
especially in response to.
Yeah, sure.
Specifically to.
Yeah, that question was posed to Parks on a couple of occasions. Never really stuck the landing in terms of a true answer, but we can certainly pose it again.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I would even add to that, right? If we can't get a true rationale for why you're doing this, then it's off the table. I mean, that's just where I would be, you know, immediately.
One of the things I will point out is Parks discussion was a little more of a free flow than even the discussion at PC. PC had something to react to. Parks was starting basically from zero. Those comments that came forward, those spreadsheets that I shared at the last time, those were individual comments. The only thing that had any Parks consensus to it were those narrative documents that were sent to you. And that was partially intentional throughout the process as it kind of went over multiple meetings. Honestly, they just were kind of struggling with building consensus around anything, so we moved it forward as individual recommendations. So we can certainly ask the question.
But they have something substantial to react to now.
Sure.
Yeah. Good.
I mean, the map is aspirational, you've said that, and it's a wish list. But one of the questions I have, I mean, once this goes out for public comment, anyone can wish for anything.
Right.
But do members of commissions or authorities have more of an obligation to call out the purpose for why that's there? You know, is there a master parks plan? I don't know that as well, but is that there, and is that the reason why these things, why they're setting aside or putting features onto the official map? And is there a different obligation to maybe justify why you're putting that on if you're on a commission or on an authority?
And I think it's probably a mixed response, to be honest with you. Some are probably rooted in past planning documents. Others may just be personal opinion.
Right.
There has to be a compelling argument.
Yeah.
For or against.
In the 2008 process, there was a very similar initial map that was put forward. And at the time, and I don't even remember who at that time was on council that was involved in making decisions, much of what had been presented was stripped away from the final version for some of those very reasons. And in some cases, there have been some changes. There are some planning documents that kind of relate to some of these items that are here. But on the other hand, you know, to Mike's point, you know, it's a mixed bag, mixed response. There's no grounding in any of this. I mean, some of the grounding you heard tonight from Mr. Pauly, 1,300 elevation level.
Right.
Absolutely very true. Forest district, cows in the forest, all those kinds of things that you sat through, the planning commission has dealt with over time. You know, those are very, very ingrained in township tradition and process. Some of these others are, clearly just are not.
So is it possible there's things on there that just one Park and Rec member?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There was not.
That was my impression.
There was not, as Mike indicated, there was not consensus.
Well, that's not good.
That's not why we remanded to the committee, right? We want the committee to come out with the committee's recommendations.
And I would defend staff in this case. Staff went back to the well repeatedly to try to get that. And they were unable to get that. So there are elements here that are only in the mind of an individual.
Well, I didn't know that, and that's really important information and honestly disappointing. And I'd be in favor of remanding that these things be consensus. I mean, what's the point if you just throw it out to the neighborhood and just add stuff if you're going to do that?
I would agree with that. I mean, my assumption was that it was I guess you guys had said it, but it didn't really hit me until just now. My assumption was that this was a committee consensus. I thought maybe one person or two people advocated for something, but.
Or at least a majority.
A committee action, right? Yeah.
And that's why I
They
asked.
didn't object to it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I asked the question, because otherwise it's really just general members of the public putting their wishes on the official map versus someone acting as part of the commission or the commission acting as the commission. That's an important distinction.
Yeah, and there was quite honestly a point in time where it was like, okay, we need to give something to Planning Commission to react. So I'll own it. I took it to Planning Commission and said, okay, Planning Commission, here's everything that has been put out there, kind of the universe of comments at this point. What do you got? Planning Commission had good discussions around that.
Yeah,
what you see in terms of the mapping is essentially staff's best shot at taking that universe of comments, however it came, individually or through consensus within committees, and condensing that to something that aligns with the text in the ordinance. So that you went from a universe of probably a couple, I don't know, maybe 100 comments to, wherever we're at now, right around 50.
I mean, I would just add that I think we just need to use this experience wisely and not repeat the same mistakes next time, right? Maybe build a better process that another council can decide what they want.
Some of that at Planning Commission too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, they had the benefit of a lot to react to. And honestly, you saw where the maps were that they had, that you saw those in your last agenda. There was a lot there to react to, and it's almost like information overload to some extent. So that's why staff took the direction of, okay, we're going to try to take this map, synthesize it into something that has, some connection back to the ordinance, and that's what we've provided to you to react to. When Planning Commission saw that map, basically this template map that you're working on, that's where we got to the spreadsheets of, that one doesn't make sense. Let's suggest removal there. Before that, it was a lot of what does this mean? The discussion around eminent domain really dominated a couple of the meetings. Like everything with official map, and one of the reasons we provided this document out to you was, and we heard it loud and clear at the last meeting. It was almost starting back from zero, official map 101 type stuff. Benefit of hindsight, that's probably how the discussion should have started, but.
It doesn't sound like many townships have an official map either.
It's a kind of a fuzzy planning concept. I like your term that you've used, Adam, too, to kind of move the discussion of dibs or shotgun. It's
that analogy was awesome.
Yeah.
By the way.
Why, thank you.
Yes.
It was worth it.
It was award-winning.
It was award-winning.
20 minutes it took to read the email.
It was award-winning.
All right, so what? Yeah, Rich.
Well, the only thing
what's next, right? That's my question.
The only thing I don't want to dismiss, just because it's only one person's comment, I don't have a problem with that if there's a compelling argument in support of it.
Right.
If there isn't, then yep, that's out. kind of thing. So if we have questions on those, we
Well-
ask for a compelling argument. If one can't be provided, then.
Yeah, I mean, I would have expected that to be vetted out in the committee. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
If there wasn't a compelling argument with something, I would have expected the committee or the commission to vet that out and say, no, we're not sending it forward.
Right.
And I will tell you, the planning commission had this basically exact discussion of, okay, what's the why behind some of these lines? And that question was asked a couple times. And, we never really got answers. We got some tweaking to what the project was. We got a little bit of rationale here and there. The problem was, without that general consensus, you were relying on individual members to tie back their rationale.
Right.
And we just frankly didn't get it.
And it strikes me, we asked the commission to give us their decision as a commission, not their collective, their individual decisions. They're not giving us an inventory of their decisions. So having that from Parks would help too.
Yeah, and to Adam's point, that was a recognition from staff as, I think we were 3 meetings deep at that point, and I didn't see a path for consensus. So it was like, okay, we'll take these as individual comments, bring it forward to planning commission, let them do some work in vetting.
Which they did.
That discussion went back and forth. Yeah, planning commission did. We reached to this point of this mapping. So we can, like I said, we can certainly ask the question, and we can certainly take the map once council's comfortable with it back, but it's a question of how long do we want the process to go, I guess is part of it.
Well, I mean, yes, that's my question. I simply asked what's next, and I'm asking for advice from staff because I'm feeling like this could be stalling. I don't feel like we're getting very far very quickly or efficiently.
Dustin, you had asked about, what are the lessons learned? And I think now, having gone through this, my second time here, as far as a complete overhaul, the mistake that we have made both times here has been that we have not, as council, provided something for each of those entities, Parks, Planning Commission, to react to in the first place. There's been the underlying official map, but beyond that, there was really nothing else, and it was thrown wide open. And I think that, going forward, if we ever do it again, I don't know that this is a corrective action for this process, but going forward, if we ever do this again, I think that we have to have much more refinement going into the ask that we make of our ABCs to help us vet what it is that we want to see on this map. Which means it's a staff heavy, and it's a heavier lift for staff initially, reviewed and approved by council for remand, more so than what we did this last time.
Yeah, we started down that, I'm sorry, Rich.
No,
We started down that process, but we probably, to your point, didn't go far enough. We had the discussion with council about embedding the corridors from headmaster plan. And then when the remand went forward initially to planning commission, it said, take a look, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, take a look at what we've done here. Make sure that, that fits within the context of the ordinance. And as part of this discussion, bring any comments that Parks and Recs has. And that's the part that kind of was left a little wide open. So I would agree with Adam to his point. It may be putting some guide rails essentially on the process and saying, this is specifically what we're looking for from Parks. This is what we're going to ask, and kind of procedurally, starts at Parks, moves to Planning Commission, moves to us. Yeah, there's lessons learned in every process, and this one's no exception.
I would so the only thing that may be different from the first time to this time, we made a hell of a lot of investment in the PED master plan.
Right.
And that should inform this greatly. We don't have anything that is informing some of the reservations and things like that. And that's maybe where we need to get better.
Yeah,
we as a council need to get better.
That's my question. Because if Parks is saying they want to reserve private property, then having a justification for why, or as part of maybe another plan or a potential plan, that would be important.
There's probably no more powerful tool in our arsenal to implement the PED plan than the official map.
Right. Absolutely. That was fundamental guiding thing. There was much talk about updating the official map, and we said, well, let's get the PED master plan in there, and then we'll update it. So here we are with that piece, but we have, I think council needs to provide intent for the reservation piece, the other elements that are in the official map.
Well, one of the options there's no prohibition about how often a municipality deals with or amends or modifies their official map. So one of your options, just thinking out loud here, one of your options is to only do at this juncture the incorporation of the PED master plan elements. And once those have been incorporated into the official map, then embark on yet another process for additional tweaking, if you will, that could then, go back through the process. Like I said, thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I think that's, what we've heard around the table, and I don't disagree, is, what you're looking for is some rationale, intent behind why things are being put on the map. Obviously, PED master plan, there was pure intent there. That no one has questioned that one throughout this process.
And it's been through a very public process.
Absolutely.
Already.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's your baseline. Everything else is subject to that question of rationale, intent.
Yeah, there's two things. We have the PED master plan, and there's things that either have already been done or that we know have to come off.
Low hanging fruit.
Right.
Yes.
Those could very easily be what the initial action is by council.
So let's do this recommendation I have here. Based off of what Adam said and staff said, let's get kind of an idea, just go around the horn for, council on what, the path ahead, the way ahead, right? Next step. Whoever's ready, I guess we can start with Susan.
Sure. I do think you've all said it better, but my first question was, what is the rationale and the intent for whatever goes on this map? I became more familiar with the pedestrian facilities master plan as part of looking at this map, looking at the primary and secondary corridors. So I would support focusing more on using the official map as a way to implement some of the aspirations of that plan as a first step. And the other piece is, not that, and this is a long process, and recognizing council only has so much time, but if we leave, what is it now, 15 years between revisits to the map, that puts a lot onto each revisit. Right. So if we did it maybe if we ate the elephant one or two bites at a time and did this and really defined what is going on here by rationale and intent as the first step, and then the next might be perhaps a little more aspirational, but more guided aspiration by virtue of what we've already put on this next map. So that would be my...
Thanks. Rich?
No, I'm gonna get pinged again. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, Yeah. We got a lot of good stuff here. One of the things that a driving force that I know I've been saying for 5-6 years or whatever is, should PennDOT come through and do a road and we don't have the sidewalk on there, we've foregone our opportunity to have a voice in that and everything. So I'm for whatever moves that element. Again, as Eric said, very public process. It just lends itself, and I think there's some house cleaning that could be done with that and very easily justified. I think we've already talked about most of it and everything. And then use that same diligence that we use for the PED master plan for these other elements onto the official map.
Right. So more like, yeah, immediate action, longer term action.
Right.
Yeah. Eric?
So when the award-winning manager thinks out loud, it actually helps us out, doesn't
Oh,
it?
yeah. That's
On
on
occasion.
award winning. Yeah, on occasion.
Exactly what Susan and Rich said.
Yeah. I support that, and I 100% support that because, I mean, very aptly, it's getting something done, right? And what's the most important part of this, right, as we pointed out, is the ped master plan, right? That's why we came back to this, right? That's the whole purpose of why we came back to, after how many years of just setting it aside, right?
Yeah.
So how do we do that? How do we want to do that, staff? Are we gonna remove the additional things and bring it back to
Yeah,
this?
I think what we need to do, and this will require some more Shane time, but I think what we do is we make sure that we show those elements of the existing official map, okay? Identify those portions of the existing official map that are the low-hanging fruit that either are no longer relevant or that we know conditions have changed in such a way that they need to be removed or they need to no longer be represented on that map. So that takes care of, if you will, the base official map. And then
And like the low hanging fruit, like a recently acquired lands or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we simply incorporate the
Ped.
PED plan.
Yeah, over top. That's all over.
And that would be theoretically what you would be considering as a potential new official map at this juncture.
Yeah.
So that will require some time.
Sure.
To put that together. I don't know how much, but maybe within 30, 45 days, that's something, maybe by what ends up being our second meeting in July, that may be something that we can bring back here on the council agenda.
I think it's still quicker than the alternative.
It is.
Oh, I think there's no question. And I'm
What's on
only,
the other side of
they'd
that
be
is-
able, just keep in mind, we don't meet, our regular first meeting in January is 4th of July, of July.
Don't rush it any faster than the door.
Anyway, the first meeting in July, we typically do not meet because it's the 4th of July week. So we're not planning on a meeting of council. June is filling up fast with a number of things. But it may be possible to hit the second meeting in June with this.
Yeah, I think that's,
There would
yeah.
still need to be the public hearing
Yep.
and the examination time and all of that has to occur. So the adoption of this, probably best case scenario is end of September-ish.
That's better than next year.
That's better next year, yeah.
That's a timeline.
So I have to share, that Mr. Pauly brought back some flashbacks. One of the first topics I ever dealt with on planning commission was that cow. And we kept going and we were talking ostriches and this and that and the other thing. And I finally said, how about we approve what we all can agree on? Which is let the cow in. Well, the ped master plan is the cow. Let's get that.
I'll have to, at another time, hear about the cow stuff. I don't know about it, but yeah.
It was something.
It never went away.
All right, so staff has what they need for direction
Yeah.
on this item.
I think, Adam hit the nail on the head. The earliest possible that you could see this is the second meeting in June, but most likely July.
Right.
The thing that's incumbent on staff is recognition of the work that's been done so far by the respective
Right.
committees. That becomes kind of a subset of, okay, what do we do with that next? Because there
Right.
has
We
been
don't want to
some-
lose that
Yeah.
work.
Right.
We want to retain it.
Yes.
But we got to get something going for 2020.
Yeah, no, and that's entirely appropriate, and like I said, those have been the least, for lack of a better term, objectionable elements, basically 1, 2, and
Well, they've
3
been
on your,
vetted by the public. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
at a high level.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, 1, 2, and 3 in your spreadsheet, plus everything else that's, an update of the map, what's been done, what's out there. That's low-hanging fruit.
All right, excellent. All right, we're moving on to NB1. All right, we made it through the old business. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out.
Let's drag this out. Walt's been here this long.
What a
He was,
patient man.
Walt was warned.
What a patient man.
We're here this evening to introduce to council updates to the rental housing and building safety code. Periodically, new code is adopted by the standard setters, and eventually that trickles down to Center Region, and essentially that's what we're dealing with here. I had provided everyone a link. It's embedded in the memo here for you to take a look at the actual code and the actual changes. Those changes through the link showed up in red. There were certain sections, in particular the alarm section, that was extensively modified. But there were relatively minor tweaks that were made throughout the balance of the new code that's being proposed to be adopted. Walt's here this evening, and we want to give him his opportunity to help us with this introduction. So without further ado, Walt, take it away.
Good evening. I'm Walt Schneider. I'm the Center Region Code Administration Agency Director.
You've already been up here once tonight, right? Yeah.
Pardon me?
Yeah, you already been up here
Yes.
once tonight.
Well, I figured I'd make sure you had it.
Thanks, Paul. I'm just giving you a hard time.
It's all good.
Yeah.
So, as the manager indicated, we have provided you a document. This has gone through a significant public comment capabilities. So we took public comment in the fall, was advertised regionally. We took those public comments, we took staff input, and we came up with a red line document, which you have in front of you. The document itself, the first major change was the name. Truly, one of the comments we got over the last couple of years was, where the heck do I find the rental housing regulations? The name itself actually dated back to the first edition that we had done with this, which dated back to 2010. And due to some input of some folks that are unfortunately no longer around, we had come up with the Center Region Building Safety and Property Maintenance Code. We originally had come up with, oddly enough, this name. And it was kind of shoveled to the side, and the other name was used. We're now back to this. So I think by the time you get to the circular argument, we might have the correct name. So the Center Region Rental Housing and Building Safety Code 2013 edition is in front of you. The proposed changes are in red. The document has, I would argue, three real main components to, if I had to lump them all into kind of buckets. The first, I'm going to go backwards in some respects, is Chapter 11. That's the fire alarm ordinance, and it's more than just fire alarms, it's alarms as a whole. Public Safety Committee charged us probably 9 months ago now, if not a year ago, to help trying to alleviate the plight of our emergency responders, police, fire, and EMS with regards to false alarms. We looked, everybody has alarm ordinances on the books. I shouldn't say everybody, but most municipalities have something on the books for false alarms. No one has really ever administered it. So what we felt the easiest thing to do was to bring it into this document, put it in a codified version, and be able to look at it cohesively. We have spoken with the chief of police for College Township, which is John Gardner. He is in favor. We've talked to the chief of the fire department, which is currently Sean Kaufman as the acting director for the fire administration, and he is on board. We don't have a lot of complaints about EMS false alarms. We are prepared to have staff dedicated to this and working with this cohesively to to try and address this region-wide. The only municipality so far that has told us that they will not be implementing is Patton Township, because Patton PD already does a piece of this ordinance themselves, and they're going to retain that. So Sean Kaufman will be working with Patton PD regarding the fire alarm side of things. But at this point, State College Borough, we anticipate Harris Township also, because they get police services also from the borough, and Ferguson Township is also going to be on board, as well as we're anticipating and hoping that Bellefonte Borough also is on board with this. So that's Chapter 11. It really takes what's in place in an ordinance and brings it over. One clarification that was asked of us previously is if I have Ring or something similar from an alarm standpoint, am I going to be part of this? And the answer is, if you use the basic service where it calls you and then you have to call 911, the answer is no. We've got nothing in it. If Ring, you get the upgraded service and Ring calls 911 on your behalf, then yes, you are part of this just like you would if you had any other alarm service. They're doing the exact same function. So we don't want to discriminate against, a bricks and mortar versus a non-bricks and mortar. The second set of updates in this are throughout this. A lot of them are, for example, Chapter 7 is heavy with things that were rewritten at the national level. We go back and we look at what the Property Maintenance Code published by ICC has recommended and so on. And a lot of their updates are throughout this for that kind of thing. So we have some renumbering that took place that way. Again, the big one is Chapter 7 updates. And then the last is things that really came out of tenants and tenants' rights. We have a lot of folks that made comments regarding that. One section that you do not have the language for yet, which is in legal review as we speak, is 106.6. So 106 as a whole, I apologize, it should be, yes, 106.6. Let me get back here. My apologies, it's not 106.6, it's 101.6. I misspoke. So on page 101.6, which is titled Anti-Retaliation, is currently in legal review with our solicitor. And this is something originally that came out of a request, again, from the tenants' rights standpoint, and it's anti-retaliation. It really is going to be more tenants' rights than specifically anti-retaliation, but it's the nature of a landlord using complaints against a tenant. So that language will be forwarded to the manager here as soon as we have it in hand, and I'm hoping to have that early next week. Throughout the rest of the document, there is language that updates how notice is given to tenants. We allow, and it's going to allow now emails when, and it's not notice to tenants, sorry, it's notice from landlords and us to landlords. They're going to provide us with email addresses. We can use those email addresses to provide them notice. Gives us quicker, more efficient use of information transfer. In addition to that, there's tenant notification requirements as far as the time notification. Again, just clarifying how much time we need to notify them prior to inspections, or that the landlord needs to notify them from a time of inspection standpoint. All that information, for the most part, is in Chapter 8. So throughout the document, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have from your review up till now.
Just before we start, so can we have a suggested or recommended motion to set the public hearing? Do we have to wait until we get the solicitor review completed to do that?
No, I don't think that we do, provided that we have it in advance of, well, wait a minute.
Yeah, think about that one.
Yeah, wait a minute.
Is this implemented through an ordinance?
Technically, Walt, I think we are gonna need to have that before we can set the public hearing, because once we set the public hearing, the documents available for inspection, we need to have the full language.
I believe we have, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we have time if I have it to you for first meeting in June. Then we have second meeting in June is, I believe we have time for all of the above.
We can
Yes.
still have discussions today, we just can't
Yes.
take the action.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
everybody
and I
clear on
think
that?
you're right, yeah. One of the objectives is also to try to have this adopted by,
The goal is we're trying to have this adopted and in place for July 1, only because that when the students come back, we have the landlords and so on have had time to make sure all the documents are in place. Because one of the requirements of this document, and has been in the place, is that the landlords give a series of documents via a website to the tenants when they move in, so that they're aware of the local ordinances and things they need to be aware of.
Right.
So we the last time when we did the 2017 edition, we had it go live on July 1, and we had great success with that. We're trying the same thing here.
Makes sense.
So I think we still have time
We
from
do,
a standpoint.
yeah, the advertising for a public hearing with modification of the ordinance gives us the ability to do that. If we have it July 1st, or June 1st.
Yes.
We should be able to get this, we should be able to hit all the benchmarks by the 15th, which is our meeting.
Okay. All right, so for questions for Walt, we can start with Eric.
Yeah, I mean, ideal situation, all the participating municipalities in Center Region Code adopted as is, right?
Well, and what we have done in the past, as well as College Township, we have provided the opportunity for the municipality to make modifications. And we're trying not to make large-scale modifications, but there are tweaks that have occurred, and College Township is no different. And notation will be made in the document that makes it easy to read as far as to know who's made those. And in the appendices, the ordinance is actually placed there. So if you look in the appendices now to this document, your previous ordinance adopting the 2017 edition is there. So you'll see that there are certain little tweaks that get made.
And do any of those tweaks need to be carried over into this?
We have given a draft ordinance at this point to the manager, and most of those tweaks have been carried forward because a lot of them are, for example, in Chapter 8 exists, we call it the point system. The municipality is the one that tracks the points. Right now, the only one who uses it is State College Borough. It has been kept in place in all of the municipalities in case it's needed later. If we find there's a problem, the point system exists. So we go through and we've corrected citations in the point system to match College Township's ordinances.
Okay, I was just curious.
Sure.
It sounds like you have a great way for managing the potential differences between the municipalities.
We try.
Any questions specific to the ordinance or comments?
That was very general, but.
Okay. Susan?
No questions.
Rich?
No questions.
I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience, Walt.
So
Anytime.
I believe we're done with NB1.
That's what happens when you come up at 11:15.
It's all good.
All right, anything for staff informatives?
You can tell it's election season by the sign violations.
There are no political sign violations.
Oh, those are all regular, non-political sign violations.
Construction signs, that's what they are.
There's more sign violations than rental violations, though.
Well, it doesn't take long, middle of the night, for someone to go down College Avenue and jump out and plop 20 signs between two township lines.
All right. Council, other matters, staff, other matters. Yes, Mike.
Not to belabor.
Oh, Mike.
That's right.
Is this the assistant manager?
This is the assistant manager.
This is the
Before we
assistant
hear the
manager
Al
report.
story, other matters?
That's right. Just a quick update. We're trying to set up the second CIP strategic planning meeting. Struggling to find a workable date. May 31 was the only one that looked reasonably close, but one member that definitely can't attend. And I would note that week, That would be meeting number 3 for council in that 1 week. So right now, I'm kind of leaning into, June 5th had everybody's availability and utilizing that as our second meeting, and then holding a later meeting for the staff review, but.
Traditional
Yeah,
CIP discussion.
yeah, just schedule's getting away from us a little bit, but that June 5th meeting on the last doodle poll looked really good for everybody, so if that's still workable for council, I think that's what we'll lean into. Staff has put together a draft, we're still in review, getting at the point that Eric had referenced about a matrix. I think it achieves the goal of trying to move towards that strategic planning element to embed in, and then we'll kind of build out from there, but just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, just to add on other matters, I think the DEI workshop for COG is next week, right?
That's right, I
Yeah,
should have
so
mentioned that.
we didn't
Next
put that in the
Tuesday.
DEI, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
That just occurred to me because I was thinking about my schedule for next week and how busy it is.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
You so
Yep,
moved?
that was it.
All right, I second it, we're adjourned.